I have a sweet at the end of the world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 976, Return to the New Country. On the third day, Shang Shan Kui left Jiang Chen's villa with lifeless eyes. There was no scar on her body, her uniform was clean and tidy, and there was nothing unusual from the outside. But she always felt that something in her heart was broken. Morality? Pride? Or maybe both. What happened in the past 2 days? She swore that she would never tell anyone in her life. If she had seen Jiang Chen before, she would at most feel terrified. But now, she was not only physically afraid of that face and name, but also terrified to find that she actually couldn't hate him. At first, she was still resisting Jiang Chen holding her hand. But later, she took the initiative to cater to him, and even started to call him master. Of course, she was forced. Looking at the business card in her hand, she couldn't help but want to tear it up, but she finally restrained the impulse. She remembered what Jiang Chen said to her with a smirk when she was lying on the carpet with lifeless eyes. How should I put it? I was so excited that I went too far. Seeing you like this, I feel really bad. After all, I'm the man who took your virginity, so I should be gentle with you. Don't think too much. I won't apologize, but I will still give you a little compensation. Keep this business card. It has my personal phone number. If you encounter any trouble, remember to call me. Haha, of course, if you need anything, you can also call this number. Only a ghost would do that. After hesitating for a moment, he finally put the business card into his bag. Sun Jiao took a deep breath to calm down her chaotic emotions, took out the car keys, started the police car, and left the road. Standing by the window of the villa, Jiang Chen looked at the gradually dissipating exhaust gas outside the window, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Although he will return to Singapore tomorrow, he always feels that there will be a chance to meet again. After the premiere of The Three-Body Problem 1, the screening in major theaters in Japan also began. Just after Jiang Chen spent 2 days at home in the villa, the box office statistics for the first weekend of The Three-Body Problem 1 in Japan came out. With 300 screens, it took in 310 million yen at the box office, which is already a pretty good result. In comparison, the audience for science fiction works in the Japanese film market is quite limited. This can be seen from the fact that Star Wars 7, which grossed $500 million in its first week worldwide, lost to the game-adapted movie Yokai Watch 2 in its first week in Japan. Even Hollywood special effects blockbusters are hard to please here. In any case, with this impressive report card, director Wu and Yaozu can confidently start filming the sequel The Three-Body Problem 2. And domestic science fiction films will no longer be a blank slate. In early March, Jiang Chen boarded a plane back to Singapore at Tokyo International Airport. Originally, he had to go to South Korea to negotiate the electricity export business with Samsung Group. But the recent news from Europe forced him to change his plan temporarily and return to Singapore in advance. After getting off the plane at the Koro airport, Aisha, who was waiting in the special channel, rushed to Jiang Chen as soon as she saw him, wrapped her arms around his neck, and hung on him. "Miss me?" Looking at those sapphire eyes, Jiang Chen smiled and touched Aisha's hair. Aisha nodded vigorously, without saying a word, but buried her head happily in his shoulder. "Okay, come down quickly, don't you see that Jiang Chen is very troubled?" Walking on high heels, Zhao walked to the side, patted Aisha's back, then looked at Jiang Chen, and said with some resentment, "It's been almost half a month, and you are finally back." "Ahem, I'm a little busy at work." Jiang Chen scratched his cheek with his fingers embarrassedly. Of course, he wouldn't say that he had actually finished all his work 3 days ago, but for some reason, he relaxed in Japan for 3 days before coming back. "You two are so close, how about taking me with you?" Natasha came over with a smile on her face, her head lazily resting on her arms. Judging from her beach-style t-shirt, she should be on vacation in Singapore again. As soon as she finished speaking, her sharp eyes locked on her. Natasha waved to the two girls and laughed heartily. I'm just joking. Don't take it seriously. Just a joke. Sun Jiao said suspiciously. Other women are okay, but she always feels bad. Still hanging on Jiang Chen's chest, Aisha muttered softly. Jiang Chen didn't stay at the airport for long. After handing his luggage to the accompanying bodyguard, he took the girls to his car. Because Lamborghini only has 2 seats, he rarely drives it now. Instead, he bought a custom luxury car designed for him by Luca Automobile Company. Because it will not be released on the market, there is no accurate price for this car. However, judging from the titanium alloy body and the high-power electric engine, the cost of this car alone is more than 10 million. After getting in the car, Jiang Chen personally took the steering wheel for the first time in a long time and drove onto the highway outside the Koro International Airport. Judging from the streets on both sides, this city already has the prototype of an international metropolis, and the people walking on the streets are all passengers of different skin colors. Blowing the sea breeze from the western Pacific Ocean, Jiang Chen glanced at Natasha sitting with Aisha in the rearview mirror and asked casually, "Speaking of which, are you working for the Russian KGB or the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs now? I always feel that the boundaries of your work are becoming more and more blurred. Did you go back to China to handle work some time ago? If I'm not mistaken, your destination is Europe. To be precise, it's the Russian-Ukrainian border. But unlike before, the main content of my work is planning in the rear. You know, the situation in Europe has been quite strange recently. From the 3 Baltic countries to the Black Sea border of Romania, the deployment of troops in the entire EU border area seems to be expanding. You haven't answered my previous question yet," Jiang Chen said with a smile. Okay." Natasha's expression was a little embarrassed. After hesitating for a while, she still answered the question. "My current identity is a bit subtle. On the one hand, my organization has indeed changed from the Russian Federal Intelligence Service to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs system, but I still haven't withdrawn from Ukrainian affairs, but I have retreated from the front line to the rear. It's troublesome to explain. You are not from our system, so it's difficult to understand this situation." At this point, Natasha paused and said seriously, "But don't worry, when I came to New China, I definitely didn't mean to get information from you. Our country attaches great importance to the friendly cooperation with you." "Okay," Jiang Chen interrupted her with a smile. "If I didn't believe this, I wouldn't let you stay at my house. Russia is not stupid. How could it be possible to place an agent around him to spy on him when it knew that Aisha, a senior official of the New China Intelligence Bureau, was always with him? Not to mention that he never had the habit of keeping confidential documents in his home, and the only study room he used for office work could only be entered after obtaining permission." Natasha smiled at Jiang Chen gratefully, but her mouth soon became pouty. She noticed that Jiang Chen used the word stay. Aisha, who was sitting next to her, smiled secretly. Perhaps because of the natural enemy, every time she saw Natasha being defeated, she felt inexplicably happy in her heart. Chapter 977. Start the money printing machine. The submarine power transmission cable from Anchor Island to Malaysia is halfway through construction. The submarine cable in Australia has already started construction. The submarine power transmission cable from Singapore and Malaysia to India has also entered the engineering preparation stage. As Jiang Chen planned, the global power grid plan is progressing smoothly and orderly. However, due to the unexpected incident in Europe, Jiang Chen had to end his trip early and return to China. The name of South Korea was missing from the first list of countries to join the global power grid of starring trade. But it doesn't matter. Jiang Chen can't travel all over the world for these submarine cables. When other countries see the benefits of importing electricity from Singapore, they will naturally take the initiative to come to negotiate. At that time, it will not be a buyer's market, but a complete seller's market. Promoting the electrification of society, significantly reducing the cost of industrial electricity, improving the energy structure, and reducing the burden of thermal power generation on the environment. These are all visible benefits, and Jiang Chen also believes that most countries will not turn a blind eye to this. After returning to China, the first thing Jiang Chen did was to convene a shareholders meeting of the new reserve and put forward a resolution that is of far-reaching significance to Singapore. Without any precious metals as collateral, the new Reserve Bank announced that it would issue a total of 1.4 trillion New Zealand dollars in 3 installments in February, based on the GDP data of the previous year released by the New Zealand Statistics Bureau, and put it on the market in batches in the next year. And in the next 5 years, the new Reserve Bank will relax the restrictions on currency issuance to meet the needs of the market. Does the market really need it? When Jiang Chen proposed this resolution at the shareholders meeting, there was an uproar at the meeting. This is not printing money, this is simply opening the floodgates. Those sitting here are bankers and capitalists in New Zealand, most of whom have been directly or indirectly supported by the Future Group. Of course, many of them have immigrated from other countries in the Commonwealth. After all, in history, this small island was once a British colony. When hearing the resolution proposed by Jiang Chen, someone immediately stood up and raised objections. Too much nonsense. Singapore's economy has finally stabilized. Printing money on such a large scale will undoubtedly cause a large-scale depreciation. What's printed here is not money, but bubbles. What's the point of printing so much money? Apart from inducing inflation, I don't see any benefits. I have no objection to printing money, but the number of 14,000 is simply wishful thinking. The total amount of currency we have issued is only 17,000 Singapore dollars, and the currency circulation is less than 50 million Singapore dollars. Is it nonsense? Standing in the venue of the new Reserve shareholders meeting, Jiang Chen glanced at the new Reserve shareholders present. Everyone, our currency circulation is close to 1/3 of the total currency volume. What does this mean? This means that we have the strength. Bubble? I would like to ask you, how much of our GDP is a bubble? Among the many businesses of Future Man Group, which one has become the top of the world's top 500 companies through real estate or financial speculation? I would like to ask you, how much of the 90% of GDP that I contribute is a bubble? Such a domineering speech left all the new Reserve shareholders speechless. As Jiang Chen said, 90% of the GDP of the new country is directly related to the two companies, Future Group and Starring Trade, and the remaining 10% is basically indirectly related to the man in front of him. After all, 4 years ago, the people on Jiao Island were still living a life of fishing and counting bananas. Today, more than 4 years later, they have not only built the world's longest submarine tunnel, but also built an elevator to the synchronous orbit and established a colony on the distant moon. It can be said that everything in the new country today is because of the man in front of them. This is a new dollar, the currency of our new country. Jiang Chen took out a coin from his pocket, shook it in front of everyone, and slapped it on the table. In 5 years at most, it will become the currency of the whole world. Let's start voting directly. Jiang Chen left this sentence lightly and glanced at all the shareholders of the new Reserve. Let me see your courage and ambition. The shareholders of the new Reserve looked at each other and exchanged opinions in a low voice. Jiang Chen sat back in his seat and watched everything quietly. About 10 minutes later, the statistical results came out. Looking at the numbers on the big screen, Jiang Chen smiled. Except for 5 abstentions and 2 votes against, almost everyone voted in favor. The miracles created by Future Group have made the shareholders of New Reserve Bank almost subconsciously make their own choices. There is no need to doubt it, right? The large-scale issuance of banknotes did have a certain impact on the exchange rate of the new dollar, but because the newly issued currency was not immediately released to the market, the impact was quite limited. After all, the printed banknotes cannot be used immediately, and they still need to be circulated in the market through lending. However, even so, the banknotes have been printed, and the news has been announced. In everyone's view, the passive devaluation of the new dollar seems inevitable. The International Monetary Fund has downgraded the credit rating of the new dollar, and central banks of various countries have also made certain adjustments to the exchange rate between the new dollar and their own currencies, causing the exchange rate of the new dollar to record a large drop in a short period of time. After the new dollar depreciated for a period of time, Jiang Chen began to gradually exchange all the foreign exchange held by the Future Man Group and Starring Trade into new dollars through the channels of Future Man Bank. This includes the profits of major subsidiaries and industries in various countries around the world, including the contracts signed at the Forum on Outer Space Resource Development. Even the foreign exchange that has not been received has been sold to the new reserve by Jiang Chen in the form of loans. This move certainly cannot be hidden from the eyes of other shareholders of the new reserve, but no one has raised any objections to it. After all, the decline of the new dollar has been confirmed, and exchanging the foreign exchange in hand for new dollars at this time is undoubtedly a high-risk thing in the short term. Moreover, at the moment when the exchange rate of the new dollar is falling rapidly, the new reserve also needs a large amount of foreign exchange reserves to stabilize the value of its own currency. Buying when the exchange rate falls means that Jiang Chen can use a small amount of foreign exchange to exchange for a large amount of paper called new dollar from the hands of the new Federal Reserve. At this moment, central banks around the world are watching the show, watching how the new Federal Reserve will kill itself, print a bunch of useless pieces of paper, and ruin its own domestic economy. And they are estimating when the companies in new country will go bankrupt because they can't afford the raw materials at the port, and then they will buy these endangered companies at the bottom. Just when everyone thought he was crazy, Xinhua Trade suddenly published a resolution on its official website. According to the regulations on space resource development issued by new country, in order to facilitate market management and taxation, Xinhua Trade held an internal meeting and decided the contracts that have been signed will not be affected. From today, including space elevator freight, goods import and export settlement and other businesses, foreign currency settlement will be terminated, and the new dollar will be the only currency for space resource transactions. The last day for double monthly tickets. Brothers who still have tickets, don't forget to vote. Chapter 978 A Secret War. Without gunpowder. From now on, New Zealand will stop using foreign currencies to settle space-related trade, and the New Zealand dollar will be the only currency for space resource transactions. When Secretary of State Kerry read out this sentence in the conference room of the White House, the entire conference room was silent. Feeling a little uncomfortable under the countless gazes, Kerry moved the document away and shrugged. "I'm done." The atmosphere in the conference room relaxed, as if receiving some kind of signal, and the whispers gradually increased. Kerry breathed a sigh of relief, sat back on his chair, threw the document aside, stretched out his hand to pinch his sore eyebrows, and glanced in the direction of Hillary and the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Logically speaking, such an internal meeting of the White House would not invite people from Congress to participate, especially since the Speaker of the House, Mr. Paul Ryan, is a Republican. But now there is no need to worry about that. Hillary and the Chief of Staff frowned. The Secretary of Commerce picked up the teacup to drink water for the 10th time, and the Secretary of the Interior looked at the ceiling thoughtfully. Economic experts and consultants looked at each other and exchanged opinions in a low voice, but it was obvious that they had not made a clear decision. If they had an idea, they would have put it forward long ago. After all, giving opinions is their only use in such meetings. This situation lasted for 10 minutes, and finally an official broke the silence. "I don't understand why they do this. The US dollar is an international currency. If the US dollar is used for settlement, many inconvenient things will be much more convenient. Obviously they want to save the shaky Singapore dollar," said an economics expert from Harvard University. "No, maybe they have bigger ambitions," said an international relations expert from Stanford University. "Just a few days ago, we all thought that they were frantically buying back Singapore dollars in the foreign exchange market, just digging flesh to heal the wound, and trying to save the failure of decision making. Unexpectedly, all this was a trap set by them." A Democratic congressman leaned back in his chair and sneered disdainfully. "I think we are totally overthinking it. How big is the market for the development of space resources? At most, it's only a few $100 billion. That's right. Our core interests are still on Earth. No matter how many resources they develop in space, they will eventually circulate in the international market. The US dollar still has undisputed influence. It's simply a pipe dream to challenge the status of the US dollar with just a space elevator. It's just the capture of an asteroid. Not to mention that the asteroid has not been fully developed. Even if it is fully developed, it's only worth a few $100 billion. The global dollar amount is more than 90 trillion, and the values of the two are not on the same order of magnitude at all. Unless they can prove the profitability of the space elevator, The debate lasted for a while, and it quieted down when Hillary cleared her throat. Seeing that everyone in the room was looking at her, Hillary spoke. "I have just exchanged views with the Speaker of the House of Representatives. We both agree that it is necessary to send the Secretary of State to make a diplomatic visit to Singapore. Expanding the application of the US dollar is one of the priorities of our diplomatic strategy. The US dollar is an international currency, and this is exactly the concept we have been committed to promoting for decades. At least, use the US dollar and the Singapore dollar for dual-track settlement. After all, the US dollar also has a certain amount of circulation in Singapore. We must remind them of this." Secretary of State Kerry turned the pen in his hand and slightly spread his hands on the table. "What about Europe? Recently in Europe." Hillary looked at him and said, "I know that everything has its priorities. The European Union is our ally, so you go to Europe first, and on the way back, stop by Singapore." Hillary emphasized the key word "on the way." Kerry nodded in understanding. "It is important to persuade starring trade to relax the restrictions on the US dollar when settling space resources, but starring trade should not take itself too seriously." Just after the starring trade published the establishment of the new dollar as the only settlement currency for space trade, the new dollar exchange rate market experienced quite strange fluctuations. Just like most stocks rebounded from the bottom and rebounded to the original exchange rate at an incredible speed. Although there are many ideas about this move by starring trade, central banks of various countries have made the same move, that is, to increase their holdings of new dollars. If the new dollar is the only currency for outer space trade, then in order to develop the country's aerospace industry with the help of the space elevator, the new dollar has a rigid demand for this country. Considering that other countries also have similar needs, the new dollar has an appreciation expectation, so the central banks of various countries will make basically the same decision after discussion. That is, use the country's currency to buy new dollars from the foreign exchange market. Under the influence of these external factors, the appreciation of the new dollar is naturally promoted. As early as when the exchange rate of the new dollar fell to the bottom, Jiang Chen purchased a total of 943.1 billion new dollars from the new Federal Reserve in batches with a total value of 212.7 billion US dollars in foreign exchange assets according to the exchange rate at that time. Now, the exchange rate between the new dollar and the US dollar is almost the same. In other words, in this money printing storm, Jiang Chen more than quadrupled the $212.7 billion funds held by Future Group and Starring Trade by transferring the funds from one hand to the other, turning it into funds equivalent to $943.1 billion. The reason why it can jump up and down like a seesaw is that the circulation of the new dollar is relatively small. If it is changed to the currency of other countries, such a large fluctuation is almost impossible, unless there is a financial tsunami. It has to be said that financial instruments are simply a magic tool for making money. When Sun Jiao put a financial report on Jiang Chen's desk, Jiang Chen made such a feeling. Even for the Future Group, which has developed to its current level, 943.1 billion US dollars is definitely an astronomical figure. Although this money is all in new dollars, it can be foreseen that the exchange rate of new dollars will be very strong for a long time in the future, so there is no difference. A resolution on large-scale printing of money and a long-awaited regulation on the currency for settlement of outer space resources. Just these two documents made the Future Group collect more than 700 billion US dollars in the foreign exchange market. In just 1 month, an Apple company appeared out of thin air. The United States annual fiscal revenue is only 5 trillion US dollars. Even for a country, this 900 billion US dollars is not a small number. Sun Jiao pulled a chair from the side and sat opposite Jiang Chen. She supported her chin with her hand, looked at the expression on Jiang Chen's face, and smiled. "How are you going to deal with it? The financial market is a zero-sum game. It does not create any value in itself, but if someone makes a profit, it must mean that someone loses money." The 700 billion US dollars did not come out of thin air, but the Future Group took advantage of the news and caught the Federal Reserve and Wall Street tycoons who manipulated the foreign exchange market off guard. It is hard to imagine that they will not take back this place. Their method is nothing more than sniping the Singapore dollar in the foreign exchange market, suppressing the exchange rate of the Singapore dollar by shorting the Singapore dollar so that the money we bought at a low price will rot in our hands and at the same time destroy the economy of Singapore. Jiang Chen leaned back in the chair and said with a smile. Sun Jiao looked at Jiang Chen with some surprise. Are you surprised? Jiang Chen was very keen to notice the surprise in her eyes and said with a smile, at least I have recharged myself a lot. Although this financial battle has nothing to do with him, it is all directed by the professional financial team of Future Bank. And these theories were also told to him by David Smith. Stop bragging. Sun Jiao rolled her eyes at Jiang Chen and stood up from the chair. Tomorrow the long distance power transmission device of the lunar colony will be activated. Are you sure that the laser beam will not poke a hole in the earth? Jiang Chen spread his hands and said helplessly. How many times have I told you that, even if it is shot at the face of the earth, it can't penetrate its ozone layer? Chapter 979 Light from the Moon. April 1st is a day of great significance for the lunar colony. Lu Fan looked up at the magnificent hemispherical building outside the colony, and a look of admiration appeared between his eyebrows. Transmitting electricity to the earth hundreds of thousands of kilometers away was almost impossible in his cognition 2 months ago. However, at this moment, he had no doubt that this project, which could be called a miracle in human history, had been completed in their hands. The original hexagonal laser generating device was wrapped by a giant hemispherical surface composed of hexagonal grids. These hexagonal grids are made of special materials, and under different conditions, they even produce completely opposite light transmittance. According to the set program, only one side of the 6 grids is light transmissive, and the other 6 grids reflect all light. Lasers of different directions are constantly reflected in the entire sphere, and finally converged in one direction, and all released from a vent, hitting a point hundreds of thousands of kilometers away. This is the mechanism of action of the entire device. Under the precise control of the quantum computer, the direction of the high energy beam is precisely controlled by changing the light transmittance of the hexagonal grid on the sphere. After all, this is a distance of hundreds of thousands of kilometers. Even light has to travel for a full second. Any tiny error will be infinitely magnified. The target receiving the laser is moving relative to the moon at all times. Only quantum computers with terrifying computing power can steer the entire project. Are you surprised? The unshaven Hebio walked to Lu Fan's side, touched his balding head, and grinned. When I return to Earth in a few days, I can brag to everyone that the life and death of the Earth was in my hands for a moment. Lu Fan followed with a meaningless smile. Didn't the colony director say that there would be no problem, even if this laser was fired at the Earth? That's true. Hebio also cast his eyes on the giant egg and grinned. But who cares so much about bragging? Hearing his boss's irresponsible remarks, Lu Fan smiled and shook his head. Suddenly, he realized a problem and frowned with some worry. You said, what if other countries give us a hard time about this issue? Hebio laughed and patted his shoulder. Then let them be embarrassed. This is a national affair, and it's not something that we little people can worry about. If the sky falls, there are tall people to hold it up, not to mention those of us who have already gone to heaven. There are still a few days before the shift change. If I were you, I wouldn't think about these things. You might as well think about how to spend the money you have earned in the past 6 months when you return to Earth. Just as the 2 members of the Ministry of Electricity were joking, Tang Weiji solemnly issued the order to launch in the colonial command room. Inside the dome, the hexagonal base began to faintly glow with a dark purple light visible to the naked eye. There were no gorgeous beams of light, nor fancy special effects. Everyone waited nervously for 3 seconds. 3 seconds later, a green signal light came on, and cheers and whistles resounded in the command room. Even Tang Weiji, who was always calm, couldn't help but throw his hat into the air. Just 3 seconds ago, or a little over 2 seconds to be exact, the spectrometer next to the dome received the return light used to verify whether the laser hit the target. This light, which ran for more than 2 seconds, brought them the news of victory. Half a minute later, Tang Weiji received a call from the ground command center. There was only one sentence on the other end of the phone. Congratulations to you, congratulations to you, and congratulations to us. This is a great moment. After sending this blessing to the commander of the lunar colony, Jiang Chen put down the phone, patted Kerwin on the shoulder, and walked out of the command room, where the cheers were deafening. Walking through the corridor, through the lobby, standing on the lawn outside the ground command center, he could still hear the joyous cheers behind him. Although he didn't see it, he could imagine people hugging each other, high-fiving each other, shouting for a celebration banquet, and crying with joy. The tense face slowly relaxed. Jiang Chen smiled implicitly at first, and soon laughed up to the sky. Finally succeeded. The efforts of the past 2 months have not been in vain. It won't be long before the high voltage electricity beaming from the moon will cover the power grid that spans 2 oceans. After seeing the ultra low cost of power generation on the moon, more and more small and medium-sized countries will abandon nuclear power and join his global power grid plan and be tied to the chariot of starring trade forever by the submarine transmission cables. At this moment, Xia Xiao walked to his side and poked his waist with her finger, piercing his fantasy at this time. Is that the end? Xia Xiao whispered with a hint of unreality. Jiang Chen turned around and gave Xia Xiao a bear hug. Before she could scream, he kissed her hard on the lips. After parting his lips, he looked at her pretty face and said with a smile, "What else do you want? Hang a colorful aurora in the sky? Light beams with a wavelength shorter than ultraviolet rays cannot be observed with a naked eye, let alone standing on the ground. Even if you are standing on the space elevator, you can't see the power transmission laser shot from the moon." Xia Xiao blushed and looked around a little awkwardly. After confirming that there was no one else, she relaxed her tense body and reached out to poke Jiang Chen's nose gently. "Look at you. You are as excited as a child." Aisha came over and looked at Xia Xiao, who was held by Jiang Chen with some envy. She reached out and gently pulled the corner of Jiang Chen's clothes. "What's wrong, Shasha?" Jiang Chen turned his head and looked at her with a smile. Aisha didn't say anything, but her beautiful eyes, like watery sapphires, seemed to be able to speak and reflected her envy. "I want one too." Just as Jiang Chen was enjoying the blessing of having 2 wives, the ground command center was already jubilant over the successful power supply. After the excitement, Kerwin looked at the 3-dimensional image on the holographic screen, and his gaze was filled with a hint of yearning. The 3 satellites floating in the synchronous orbit formed an isosceles triangle, like a work of art that combines the beauty of mathematics and physics. These 3 satellites with unique shapes, like 3 prisms, that always remain relatively still, will receive the power transmission laser through 1 or 2 reflections, and shoot it impartially to the receiving ring, embedded on the outside of the space elevator. There, the light energy is converted into electrical energy, which is transmitted from the synchronous orbit to the ground, or upward to the starring city along the superconductor transmission line installed on the outside of the space elevator. If the space elevator only allows the world to see the broad prospect of moving towards the starry sky and ignites people's enthusiasm for investing in the aerospace industry, then this laser shot from the moon is a tangible benefit that everyone can see. Without any products, the lunar colony, which burns hundreds of millions of New Zealand dollars every month, can easily become profitable just by selling electricity. Chapter 980. Pretend to be cool and then run away. In front of the pure white building of the presidential palace in Koro City is a beautiful lawn built like a park. On the lawn in front of the presidential palace, the people of New Zealand stood in a sea of people. They were excited, and they looked up at the podium, where the president was giving a speech. Amid applause, their beloved President Zhang Yaping walked to the front of the stage, waved his hand with a smile, cleared his throat, and straightened the microphone. "Today is a great day. Just this morning, from 8 AM to 5 PM now, our compatriots in the lunar colony have sent us 20 million kilowatt hours of electricity. Maybe you will be surprised, but now I'm honored to announce this fact to you. The breakthrough we have made in long-distance power transmission technology has enabled our power grid to connect with the power grid of the lunar colony." The scene erupted with long-suppressed cheers, and countless people waved the small flags of New Zealand in their hands, celebrating this great moment with cheers. Sitting in the special seats, watching Zhang Yaping giving a speech in front of the stage, Jiang Chen smiled and nodded, and clapped his hands gently. After the noise in the audience subsided for a while, Zhang Yaping looked at the people with a smile, raised his hands, and spoke loudly with emotion. For a long time, we have had to pay expensive electricity prices because of our dependence on imported energy and the high cost of nuclear power. We have had to sacrifice the environment, safety, and our children and grandchildren. But now, I solemnly declare to you that all this has become history. The environmentalist group in the audience looked at their president excitedly. Most of them wore green headscarves and green shirts, which could be clearly distinguished from the crowd. Since the construction of thermal power plants and nuclear power plants in Singapore, they have clearly voiced their opposition. And now, all this has finally paid off, although it has nothing to do with their protest. From today, I declare, Sun Jiao will fully promote the process of eliminating thermal power and nuclear power. Let this picturesque archipelago stay young forever. In addition, I make a promise here. The basic electricity price of our country will be reduced tenfold within a month. The audience cheered loudly. Jiang Chen, who was sitting in the special seat, crossed his legs and smiled at the excited crowd. From today, Sun Jiao will open a new chapter and usher in a new era of electrification. Throughout world history, no matter what means are used to dilute it, it is always capital, not ideas, that drives social progress. When the cost of electricity is infinitely compressed, efficient and energy-saving electric drive equipment will naturally quickly popularize every corner of society. Because of this light from the moon, Sun Jiao has boarded the high-speed development train. From pure electric vehicles to digital cities, the door to the future has been opened to them. Now, please allow me to give the rest of my time to Mr. Jiang Chen, the chairman of Future Group. Amidst the applause, Zhang Yaping smiled warmly, gestured to Jiang Chen who was slowly walking up to the podium, and then stepped aside. The thunderous applause paused for a moment. Jiang Chen cleared his throat and reached out to straighten the microphone. Hello everyone, I'm Jiang Chen. It is an honor to stand here and say hello to everyone. As a responsible company, we will actively respond to the policies of the Singapore government. Here, I announce that from today, Singapore will shut down the first and last nuclear power plant on Coral Island. The environmentalists in the audience cheered, and Jiang Chen smiled and nodded to the young men wearing green scarves, and then continued. Most of the facilities used for nuclear reactions in the nuclear power plant will be demolished, leaving only a deuterium reactor for producing deuterides. The original site of the nuclear power plant will be transformed into a safe and harmless deuterium refinery to separate deuterium oxides from seawater. Some people may ask, what do we use deuterium for? Do we make nuclear weapons? Before explaining this question, I would like to ask you to think about a question. From today on, we will enjoy the electricity from the moon, but how does the lunar colony generate electricity? Solar energy. Many scholars and experts in the world have speculated so. But what I want to say here is that this is a misunderstanding. Looking around at the crowd, Jiang Chen paused and raised his voice. In order to resolve possible misunderstandings, here, I have decided to disclose to you another document that was originally a Class A confidential document of the Future Group. Jiang Chen noticed that when he mentioned the word confidential, the audience was already silent, and everyone was waiting for his next words with bated breath. Especially those Western reporters carrying cameras. They have already smelled the smell of big news, and they just want to put the camera close to Jiang Chen's face. Under the expectation of everyone, Jiang Chen slowly spoke. Not only wireless power transmission, our biggest breakthrough is controlled nuclear fusion. As early as 2 months ago, the world's first nuclear fusion generator using helium-3 and deuterium as fuel has been built in the lunar colony. This sentence was like a depth bomb, thrown directly into the center of the crowd, including reporters, Singapore citizens, and tourists passing by to join in the fun. Everyone subconsciously froze for 2 seconds. Taking advantage of this gap, Jiang Chen wisely gave up the podium to Zhang Yaping and hurriedly stepped down before the media surrounded him. Listening to the unbelievable exclamations and shouts behind him, the corners of his mouth curved up, and a smile appeared. The feeling of pretending to be awesome and then running away is really exciting. Jiang Chen didn't know how Zhang Yaping settled the chaotic scene and appeased the excited reporters who rushed over, because after his speech, he went straight to the office of the presidential palace and sat on the sofa to rest. About half an hour later, Zhang Yaping, who announced the end of the speech, returned to the presidential palace. and went straight back to his office. After seeing Jiang Chen sitting in his office, he casually asked his assistant to make 2 cups of black tea, and then sat on the sofa opposite Jiang Chen and said with a smile and the tone of chatting with an old friend, "It's a very good speech. You stole all my limelight." "Really? Then I have to go back and give the assistant who helped me write the speech a raise." The two looked at each other and laughed at the same time. Jiang Chen took a sip of the still scalding hot black tea, smiled and changed the subject. "Looks like you're confident in your election." "Of course." Zhang Yaping laughed and winked at Jiang Chen humorously. "Polls show that our support rate is over 80%, far higher than the Whig Party in second place and the Socialist Party in third place. Unless something unexpected happens, I'll still be sitting in this position for the next 4 years." When saying this, Zhang Yaping cleverly used the term "our support rate." However, Jiang Chen did not care about his small thoughts of pleasing him. He just smiled lightly, stirred the misty black tea with a spoon, and said softly, "No accidents will happen. It is said that the Whig Party is supported by the British government. They advocate pushing the new country to join the Commonwealth. And the Democratic Party is supported by the Democratic Party on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. They advocate restoring the trusteeship of the Panu Islands in the 1970s by the United States and abolishing the private armed forces contracting national defense. They can't make waves." Jiang Chen smiled and said calmly, "The ghost is watching them." Hearing this, Zhang Yaping's mouth suddenly opened a smile. Compared with the young man who came to Jiang Chen for his ideals 4 years ago, he has now become a smooth and sensible politician. He knows very well that, as long as he holds on to the golden fire future group, his position as president will be unshakable. And Jiang Chen, who needs a stable political environment, will never easily replace his long-term partner. Chapter 981. A stone stirs up 1,000 waves. After Jiang Chen announced that Future Group has mastered the technology of controlled nuclear fusion, the internet went wild. After Enron Daily published this news and reposted it on its official microblog, the official microblog of Enron Daily had already posted nuclear fusion. How is this possible? Editor, do you know how high the central temperature of a nuclear fusion reaction is? If you don't know, I'll tell you. It's over 20 million degrees Celsius. There is no material in the world that can withstand such high temperatures. I don't know if there is any in the solar system, but at least there is none on Earth. The above. I'm not well educated, but I still know a thing or two about common sense. Since the temperature is too high, can't we turn down the fire? I think our country's scientific researchers can start from this angle. If New China can research it, it won't be too difficult for us to research it. Do you think the reactor is your gas stove? Haha, there are experts among the people. In addition to these meaningless replies, many well-known Big Vs also left their own words and expressed their views on Starring Trade's successive breakthroughs in the 2 major technical problems of long-distance wireless power transmission and controlled nuclear fusion. I hope that another 10,000 C papers can bring about controlled nuclear fusion. When we are still studying how to carve patterns on bronze, our compatriots across the ocean have already picked up hammers and started forging iron. I don't mean anything else. I just feel the changes of the times. A well-known news commentator made such a feeling on Weibo after reading the report of Enron Daily. Because of the breakthrough in nuclear fusion technology, the domestic electricity price of Singapore has dropped from 0.1 to Singapore dollars to 0.02 Singapore dollars. I don't know why Enron Daily didn't report this. I saw it in the international news of Future People 1.0. It seems that the title of Hope Country has to move from the Pacific Ocean. It is said that the housing prices in Singapore are not very expensive. Starring Trade recently announced a plan to colonize Mars. Friends who really can't afford to buy a house can consider it. Anyway, you don't need to learn foreign languages here. Haha. A god-level mainland game anchor nicknamed Shadow Demon said, while bragging to his friends in the live broadcast room, "It is not only China that is shocked by the rapid technological progress of Future People Group, but also the United States across the ocean." In the evening science talk show broadcast by CBS, Professor Omar Hurricane of Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, a leading figure in the field of nuclear physics in the United States, was invited to explain the difficulty of controlled nuclear fusion in plain language to all viewers. As early as the 1950s, we boldly predicted that we would be able to use nuclear fusion to generate electricity in 30 years. But until today, the term 30 years later is still our optimistic estimate of controlled nuclear fusion technology. As many people know, there is no material in the world that can withstand a high temperature of 20 million degrees, and even if it exists, we have absolutely no way to use it. In the interview, Professor Hurricane introduced the difficulties of nuclear fusion technology at the request of the host. Just a few years ago, we were actually very close to controlled nuclear fusion technology. In inertial confinement fusion, our Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory uses 192 lasers to heat and compress a fuel core until a nuclear fusion reaction occurs. We already have the prototype of a small nuclear fusion power generation device. This device is now in Livermore, California. It is like a sphere wrapped in metal, but the reactants inside are smaller than a fingernail. At this point, Professor Hurricane's expression was quite melancholy. They originally thought that the only worthy competitors for their nuclear fusion technology were Russia and China, which was catching up, but they did not expect that in the end, a private enterprise that suddenly rose in recent years, Future Group, would take the lead. After listening to the speech, the host Anderson nodded seriously and asked, "How far do you think the United States is from mastering nuclear fusion technology? It may be tomorrow, or it may be 30 years later." Professor Hurricane shook his head with a smile. "Science is something that you will never know how many steps away you are from kicking the final kick, unless you cross that door." While the public was talking about the nuclear fusion power station built by Starring Trade, the top leaders of various governments did not stop their actions. The United States took the lead in raising the budgets of 3 domestic nuclear research institutes, and announced in a high-profile manner that its domestic research institutes had made major breakthroughs in nuclear fusion projects. At the same time, Kerry, who was visiting Europe, was negotiating with France to build an undersea power transmission cable from the west coast to Paris. On the other hand, the White House did not forget to launch a diplomatic offensive to obstruct the undersea cable construction agreement that Starring Trade had signed with Australia and Japan. Obviously, the Hillary administration has realized that the undersea cable laid by Starring Trade will have an immeasurable impact on the US diplomatic strategy. Regardless of whether there is any sign of nuclear fusion technology on their side, or whether they have the ability to mine helium-3 that only exists on the moon, the Hillary administration, which is restless, has already begun to build an undersea cable connecting the US and European power grids. Russia is no longer able to increase the budget for nuclear fusion projects due to the long-term deteriorating economic situation in the country. Moreover, considering that even if they have developed their own controlled nuclear fusion technology, they do not have the ability to build a colony on the moon, to extract helium-3 from the lunar soil, and in the end, there is a great possibility that they will still buy it from Starring Trade. Russia simply sent a high-level diplomat with the president of its own unified power company to the new country to find Starring Trade to discuss the construction of an undersea cable from Manga Island to Vladivostok. Because this undersea cable is in the same direction as the undersea cable to Japan, construction can be started at the same time. This time, Jiang Chen did not go there in person, but the other party took the initiative to come to the door, and the main venue for the negotiation was naturally on Jiang Chen's side. After some discussion, Russia accepted 70% of the construction and maintenance costs of the undersea cable, and Starring Trade will also hire a local Russian company to complete the construction of this undersea power transmission cable. As for China, its attitude towards the breakthrough of Xinhuan trade and nuclear fusion technology was somewhat ambiguous. As the world's factory, China's annual power generation is also well deserved to be the world's first. The magnificent Three Gorges project can be called a miracle of hydropower engineering in human history. Its power generation is equivalent to 5 Daya Bay nuclear power plants, but the cost is far lower than the expensive nuclear power. China's industrial and civilian electricity prices are already at a low level. This is also the reason why Jiang Chen did not list China as the first round of laying targets when establishing the global power grid plan, because for the wealthy Chinese market, his cheap electricity is not so attractive. Moreover, even domestic companies want to join the national power grid and compete fairly with state-owned enterprises. It is difficult, let alone foreign companies, to join the grid. Technology. Financial subsidies can do the same. Need? Of course it is needed, but it is not urgent. As for whether China has increased the research budget for nuclear fusion power generation technology and established a new space strategy after hearing that its brother country has made a breakthrough in nuclear fusion technology, adhering to the tradition of making a fortune in silence, they did not make much noise. Chapter 982. In the midst of a storm. As Jiang Chen expected, the Yi family and the Liu family found him separately and asked about the difficulty of building a nuclear fusion power station in China. After hearing that helium-3 from the moon was needed as a nuclear raw material, they stopped talking about it and turned to ask whether the future group had any research on deuterium-tritium controlled fusion. If helium-3 and deuterium fusion are the second generation nuclear fusion power generation technology, then deuterium-tritium is the first generation technology. Although the nuclear waste produced is difficult to handle, the advantage is that all the raw materials can be obtained from the ocean without relying on importing helium-3 from starring trade. The two countries are brothers in blood and culture, but they are not without reservation. China will not allow the necessary energy in the country to rely on foreign imports, especially when this energy is monopolized by one party, unless there is no better choice. Jiang Chen will not sell the first generation nuclear fusion technology to cut off his own financial resources, so he tactfully stated on the phone with Liu Xiangguo that the future group has no research on deuterium-tritium controlled fusion, and ended the topic. Whether Liu Xiangguo, the old fox, believes it or not, the facts are here. He has no choice but to believe it. Just when the future group was in the limelight internationally because of long-distance wireless power transmission and controlled nuclear fusion, and the top leaders of various countries were re-examining their bilateral relations with the new country, another depth bomb was thrown on the big stage of the international community, completely stealing the headlines of the future group. At 9 p.m. Paris time on April 7, 2019, EU Foreign Minister Morini suddenly announced that the future EU will no longer be a loose sand, but a united and powerful whole. In other words, a country. The beach north of Koro Island, a private island surrounded by beaches and palm trees. An elegant and unique wooden villa is located in the center of the island. Under the rising sun on the sea, it is like a layer of golden sand, with a little golden color. Occasionally, Jiang Chen would choose to come here for vacation to relax. After the long-distance power transmission startup ceremony on the morning of April 1st and the speech in the afternoon, he took Asia and Sun Jiao to fly here by helicopter. And now, it is only the third day of the holiday. If nothing unexpected happens, the entire Koro Island should be filled with high-level officials from all over the world, countless foreign journalists, and experts and scholars in the scientific community. These people must want to meet him, but Jiang Chen will obviously not let them do so. The best way to deal with the problem at this time is to give yourself a vacation and wait until the international community's focus on you fades before making further plans. But what Jiang Chen didn't expect was that all this happened so quickly. In the living room of the villa, Jiang Chen, sitting on the sofa, fell into deep thought while watching the EU foreign minister speaking on TV. Originally, Natasha also planned to come here for vacation with them, but because of the news channel broadcasting this incident, she had to fly back to Moscow overnight. Jiang Chen closed his eyes and recalled carefully. When she left, her expression seemed a little solemn, and she seemed to have said this: since the Cold War, the entire Eastern Europe has never been so close to the brink of war. But why? It is obviously just a decision made within the European Union. Is there any inevitable connection with the war? Jiang Chen closed his eyes and pondered for a long time. With only limited intelligence, he still couldn't analyze the reason. The ghost agent has been working with the KGB in Germany for a long time, but there has been no good news, which also made him feel a little anxious. The situation seems to be developing in an unexpected direction, but the only thing that will happen in the future is that he can't get reference from the future because the two are not on the same timeline at all. At this time, Aisha, wearing a swimsuit, brought milk and freshly baked bread and placed the plate on the coffee table in front of Jiang Chen. Sitting gently next to Jiang Chen, Aisha leaned close to his cheek and kissed him, saying softly, "Let's eat first." Jiang Chen smiled and responded by kissing her on the cheek. "Yeah. Showing affection so early in the morning. Can you be more restrained?" Xia Xiaoyu, wearing pajamas, walked out of the bedroom, stretched out her hand to comb her black hair, looked at Aisha who was only wearing a swimsuit, and stuck to Jiang Chen, and pouted with jealousy. Of course, she was not really jealous of Aisha. How should I put it? After almost half a year of running in, she seemed to have gotten used to the life of three people together. On the one hand, it was because of Aisha's concept and personality. The two got along very well in daily life. On the other hand, it was purely because of the desire shown by Jiang Chen. It was becoming more and more difficult for her to satisfy him alone. "Do you want it too?" Jiang Chen looked at her with a playful smile and shamelessly stretched his face over. "What the hell?" Xia Xiaoyu leaned close to Jiang Chen's face and bit his ear hard. After hearing the fake cry of pain, she turned around and walked towards the bathroom with satisfaction. After having breakfast together, the three of them went to the beach, set up a sun umbrella, brought a cold drink cart and beach chairs, and spread out a beach mat on the sand. The sun in the morning was not too hot, and the salty sea breeze even made her feel a little cool. Lying on the beach mat, Xia Xiaoyu half-heartedly accepted Jiang Chen's touch and helped her apply sunscreen all over her body. Then she lay on the beach mat, lazily basking in the sun, while leisurely watching Aisha holding his hand and running to the beach. "I've been too lazy recently," she muttered softly. Her fingers gently slid across her wrist. A layer of light blue light spread out, and the boot screen of the future phone appeared in front of her. Although she was on vacation, she was the CEO of Future Group after all, and she habitually checked her work emails every morning, noon, and evening. After opening the simple office, Xia Xiaoyu leaned close to the straw and sipped a sip of the cold drink while flipping through the work emails and selecting the content that needed to be replied. Rare earth enriched deposits have been discovered in the lunar colony, and the reserves of rare earth elements such as niobium, yttrium, and dysprosium are about more than 3 million tons. Seeing this, Xia Xiaoyu couldn't help but be amazed. Because the subsidiary of Future Group is involved in the mining industry, she still has some understanding of the market of rare earths. As a country with a large number of rare earth resources in the world, China's domestic rare earth reserves account for 36% of the world's proven reserves, which is 36 million tons. What is the concept of the 3 million tons of rare earths discovered by the lunar colony? India's domestic rare earth resource reserves are 3.1 million tons, ranking 5th in the world, and the mineral deposit discovered in the lunar colony has almost surpassed the rare earth reserves of the entire India. That's strange. It's said that the moon is a big pile of gold. This is not gold at all. It's even more valuable than gold. Xia Xiaoyu curved her lips, thought for a while, and made instructions on the email, annotating this message as Class B confidential, and included it in the database of Future Group. Now because of nuclear fusion power generation, too many jealous eyes have been focused on Future Group and starring trade. At this time, if it is announced that a rare earth deposit has been discovered in the lunar colony, I'm afraid that some people will really jump out and make small moves. The pace of announcing the news should be slowed down for now, and it won't be too late to announce it after it is mined. Just as Xia Xiaoyu threw the email aside and looked down the list, an email suddenly caught her attention. Chapter 983 UFO. On the 4th day of vacation on the island, Jiang Chen ended his originally scheduled 7-day vacation early and took a helicopter back to Koro Island. It was all because of an email that temporarily changed his vacation schedule. On the evening of April 4th, a black helicopter whirred its propellers and approached the heavily guarded island on the equator. In the night, it descended towards the helipad with flashing green lights. Before it landed on the helipad, Jiang Chen, who was wearing casual clothes, jumped on the helipad and walked towards Kerwin, who had been waiting there for a long time. This is the original site of the Space Launch Center. After the establishment of the Ministry of Aerospace, it was renamed the Starring Ground Command Center. It is the headquarters of the Ministry of Aerospace, which has the most extensive starring trade business. Walking side by side on the way to the command center, Kerwin walked beside Jiang Chen and spoke with a serious expression. The night before yesterday, when the astronomical observation team of our Mars colonization project was analyzing astronomical data on the route to Mars, they conducted optical observations on the C1201 channel and discovered that thing. It's really unbelievable. Has the news been blocked? Jiang Chen asked without stopping. It has been blocked, Kelvin said seriously. Jiang Chen nodded. The confidentiality level is S level. The relevant personnel will bear with them and be temporarily isolated. Kelvin took a deep breath and nodded. Understood. The Mars colonization project team, as the name suggests, was established to colonize Mars. It aims to solve all possible difficulties in life from the departure of the colony ship to the landing of the colonists on Mars. The ecosystem is easy to say. The Eden project in the end of the world can be used as a reference, but other troubles are not small. Even if the technology of the end of the world is absorbed, many places must be designed by modern scientific researchers in person. In the timeline of the end of the world, due to various political and diplomatic reasons, until before the war, no one from the three major camps successfully built a colony ship to Mars, or achieved a large-scale breakthrough in space activities. According to Linling, there were indeed colonies on Mars from the three major camps of CCCP, NATO, and PAC, but they were basically scientific research in nature and naturally quite limited in scale. Because the ecological cycle could not be achieved after the Earth's space elevator was destroyed, the three colonies that relied on Earth for material supplies were forced to abandon. It is not difficult to launch a spacecraft to Mars. NASA did it a long time ago. But to establish a colony that can maintain a stable exchange of materials with the Earth, rather than making going to Mars a one-way ticket, is not as simple as launching a spacecraft. Mars and the Earth always maintain relative motion, and the distance interval varies between 55 million and 400 million kilometers. Ensuring a stable route from the Earth to Mars is the key to realizing the Mars colonization plan, and this work is completed by the astronomical observation team and the project team. Their daily work is to use the route calculated by the quantum computer, and then confirm whether there are obstacles such as meteorites and asteroids on the route through optical, spectral and other observation methods. However, when observing the route numbered C1201, they found something similar to a UFO. The two stopped in front of an aluminum alloy door with the logo of the Mars colonization project. Kerwin took out the graphene card in his hand and swiped it on the card reader at the door. After the door opened, Kerwin walked quickly to the holographic screen in front of him, and the project leader sitting there immediately gave up his seat. Kerwin stretched out his hand and tapped the back of the chair of the front row staff and ordered, "Aim the Starring 1 astronomical telescope at the C1201 channel." Yes. The staff nodded and tapped the touchpad. The astronomical telescope far away in the starring city swung slightly, and the lens began to zoom. Soon Jiang Chen saw that a dark shadow appeared in the center of the holographic screen. The shape of the black shadow was similar to a regular sphere, and the space around it was twisted like folds of airwaves, exuding a deadly ominous atmosphere. The pupils shrank slightly, and Jiang Chen's heart was instantly raised to his throat. Through elemental spectrum analysis, the target titanium content is above 61%. Without noticing the change in Jiang Chen's expression, Kelvin called up another orange-red spectrum chart and explained the parameters on the chart to Jiang Chen. When Jiang Chen heard this, he slowly breathed a sigh of relief and his clenched fists loosened. Although it is not certain whether biological civilizations use metal to arm themselves, at least one thing is certain. Since the technology tree has turned to biological organisms, the carbon content must be above 50%, right? After stabilizing his emotions a little, Jiang Chen raised his chin towards the black sphere on the holographic screen. What is that? I don't know. Kelvin's expression was indescribably strange, like excitement, but also like suspicion. We guess it may be a UFO from another civilization. Another civilization? Jiang Chen was stunned for a moment, then frowned. Enlarge it. I can't do it. Kelvin shook his head. I can't do it? Jiang Chen was stunned for a moment. Kelvin did not explain, but chose to hide it directly in front of Jiang Chen. He patted the chair of the staff member sitting in front of him and signaled him to adjust the focus of the telescope and zoom in on the UFO in the lens. The next magical scene made Jiang Chen's eyes widen. As the lens zoomed in, the UFO in the center of the lens began to tear. When the distance exceeded a certain limit, the dark UFO began to blur, as if it was coded, and finally disappeared from the picture. Yes, it disappeared directly. The silence lasted for a long time. When the staff member zoomed out again, Jiang Chen suddenly spoke. Optical invisibility. Yes, Kelvin nodded solemnly. We think so too. From this point alone, the possibility that this spacecraft was launched by the former Soviet Union or the United States is completely ruled out. Currently, only Starring Trade and Future Group have mastered mature optical invisibility. This UFO can be observed optically. Our technology cannot currently analyze the exact mechanism of action, but one thing is certain, this function should have been damaged for some reason, otherwise we should not be able to see it at all. Instead of being able to see a nearly spherical black shadow at a certain distance like now. At this point, Kelvin paused for a moment and expressed his guess. If this explanation is true, then the remaining possibility is that this should be the wreckage of a UFO. Looking at the black shadow on the screen, Jiang Chen pondered for a long time before speaking. Is there any way to pick it up? Kelvin looked embarrassed and shook his head. It's too far away. It's 30 million kilometers away from us in a straight line. The cruising radius of our AX-1 series spacecraft is only 1 million kilometers. It is not capable of flying outside the Earth-Moon system, let alone bringing it back. It's okay to just go up and take a look. Jiang Chen looked at Kerwin. We must at least know what's up there. At least we must know what's up there before other countries do. After thinking for a long time, Kerwin sighed and spoke. In theory, the RM-400 ion propulsion engine used by the AX-1 series spacecraft already has the ability to travel in the stars. With the help of the ejection port of the space elevator, it is not difficult to accelerate to the second cosmic speed and leave the Earth-Moon system. But the key is the battery of the AX-1. According to the calculation of the quantum computer, its energy is just enough for one round trip. If we force this flight mission, it will most likely be a one-way ticket. If we can't return, it will be a real drift in the universe, almost a death certificate. After thinking for a while, Jiang Chen made a decision. Select volunteers from the active pilots of Starring Trade. Those who participate in this top secret flight mission will automatically be promoted 3 levels in rank, regardless of whether they survive or not. Install a hibernation chamber in the Stingray X-1 that is carrying out the mission. If it is determined that it is impossible to return, allow the cryo-hibernation program to be activated to send our volunteers to the future. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 984 Corporate Dictatorship. The problem of the aircraft is easy to solve. In addition to the 4P1 electric ray that have been delivered to Future Man Mining, the 5X1 prototypes produced by Future Man Heavy Industry for Starring Trade have entered the delivery stage. Select an X1 electric ray and add an attack module to upgrade it to an A1 electric ray with outer space combat capabilities. Currently, Starring Trade has a total of 20 pilots of the electric ray series spacecraft, all of whom have received training in 3 types of aircraft. The trouble now is how to select a volunteer from these 20 people. As Kerwin said, there is a high probability that this will be a death flight that cannot return. If the remaining energy on the return flight is not enough to accelerate the spacecraft to a position close to the Earth-Moon system, it will be difficult to recover it with the existing technology of Starring Trade. Although it is important to determine what the UFO is, Jiang Chen cannot spend all his time in this boundless space. He handed over the selection of volunteers and the related tasks of psychological work to Kerwin. After getting the guarantee of absolute completion of the task, Jiang Chen shifted the focus of his work to the European issue. As of mid-February, 317 high-level officials from various European countries have died due to various accidents. All clues point to one thing: they are all opponents of EU integration. At this point, Monica Geller stood in front of Jiang Chen's desk and lowered her head with shame. I'm very sorry, our intelligence was misled. Before the vote on the EU integration resolution, we thought that this was the Rothschild consortium eliminating dissidents in order to promote the Southern Corridor plan. Please raise your head and don't blame yourself too much. This can't be entirely your fault. After all, until this month, our energy has been involved in the Russian plan. Jiang Chen did not blame her. After all, it was he who personally ordered the European ghost agents to fully cooperate with the KGB's coup plan in Germany. Seeing Monica raise her head again, Jiang Chen nodded and continued. The situation in Europe has been out of our control, but it has not yet reached the point where it cannot be reversed. You will return to Europe tomorrow. I need you to do something. Monica nodded and said solemnly, I will go through fire and water without hesitation. Seeing her serious expression, Jiang Chen suddenly burst out laughing. Ahem, it's going through fire and water. Monica blushed, and she activated the optical invisibility with shame, hiding her figure. She had just learned this Chinese sentence from ZHUU not long ago. The Commerzbank headquarters building, the headquarters of the German Commerzbank in Frankfurt, is the tallest skyscraper in Germany. Since its completion in 1997, it has become the tallest building in Germany, and it was still the tallest building in Europe until 2003. As one of the 3 largest banks in Germany, few people know that the name Rothschild is at the top of its shareholder list. At 8 o'clock in the evening in Berlin time, the bank building was still decorated with lights. In the empty top floor conference room, Carmen Rothschild stood by the French window, holding the red wine produced by her own winery in her hand, quietly looking at the brightly lit night view outside the window. At this moment, a slightly short and fat German pushed open the door and walked into the conference room. Wait for me outside. The bodyguard following the German nodded slightly, took a half step back, and stood at the door of the conference room. The door of the conference room was closed, and the white bodyguard wearing sunglasses and a black suit turned slightly to look at the black man standing on the other side of the door. Hello. Johnson smiled slightly and greeted him in French. It was not known whether he did not hear or deliberately did not hear. The white bodyguard ignored him, his eyes looking straight ahead, standing there as if in a trance. Johnson grinned, ignored him, and continued to stand guard. But the look between his eyebrows gradually returned to its cold appearance. Carmen turned around, opened her arms with a smile, and greeted the German. Welcome, Greener Krupp, my old friend. We meet again. Yes, we meet again. Greener Krupp grinned stiffly, hugged Carmen despite his unhappiness, and then casually put his coat on the chair in front of the conference table. Can you explain to your old friend? What are you, or the Rothschild family, planning to do? Unlike the Child family, a Jewish family that rose in Britain, the Krupp family, born of traditional Prussian aristocrats, was almost tied to the German chariot together with the indestructible artillery. This industry spans arms, steel, ships, textiles, chemicals, oil refining, electromechanical, and even elevators in buildings, and has been integrated into almost every corner of Europe. They may not be as rich as the Rothschild family, but their strength as an industrialist is definitely not inferior to that of this Jewish family. Carmen saw through the fear on Greener's face, coughed lightly, and put the red wine in her hand on the conference table. If a company controls a region's food, medical care, water, and electricity supply, light and heavy industries, and even national defense and the military, then what is the difference between this company and the country in this region? In other words, what difference does it make whether this country exists or not? You know very well that I just did the right thing. Greener Krupp sneered. This is what we are most worried about. Whenever our old friend thinks he is right, all of us may be in trouble. From the past of the Rothschild family and the Krupp family, there is one thing that is very similar. That is, they once supported a certain devil, and they were almost sent to hell by that devil. Rothschild once lost the whole of Europe, and the Prussian nobles were also persecuted by the SS. In history, every madman who tried to unify Europe has brought disaster to the whole world. The Rothschild family used bloody means to force the EU integration bill to be passed at the EU meeting, attempting to turn the entire EU into a country, and then select a puppet to sit in front of the stage while they sit behind the scenes. Not only the Krupp family, but also the 33rd Freemason Parliament felt a little uneasy about Rothschild's behavior. "My dear friend, please listen to me first," Carmen said with a smile. "I'll give you half an hour." Greener Krupp looked at his watch and said coldly. Carmen shrugged and made a casual expression. Clearing his throat, he paused for a moment and then spoke. "Humans are economic animals. They cannot live without money throughout their lives. The same is true for our society. The speed of social development depends on the speed of money flow. If society is compared to a person, then money is its blood. Throughout world history, revolutions of all sizes are all aimed at overthrowing the blood clots that block the blood vessels of civilization. We elect a puppet to stand in front of the stage, and we stand behind the scenes, manipulating this puppet. We will be more democratic than ever before, more advanced. We no longer manipulate elections, we directly manipulate candidates, and at the same time, our president no longer enjoys the power that a president should have. I call this new political system corporate dictatorship. Why do I feel like this is copied from somewhere?" Glenn interrupted and sneered. "I have to admit that it was our opponents who inspired me," Carmen said with a smile. "Although we also manipulate politics, they are more thorough than us. They have hollowed out politics. But what I want to discuss here is not them, but us." Carmen pointed to her chest, then pointed to the ring on her hand that symbolized the 33rd degree membership, and continued. "Poorly managed subsidiaries will be restructured, turned from losses to profits and reborn. The same goes for the EU. The restructured EU will be more efficient and stronger than before. And you, me, and the newly established 13-member committee will serve as shareholders of the entire EU. Chapter 985 I curse you." Silence lasted for a long time in the conference room. Greener Krupp now understood that the Rothschild family had been planning for this a long time ago. At that time, he just thought that the push for the right-wing political power in European countries was just because of the feud between Jews and Middle Eastern Christians, but he didn't expect that all this was a foreshadowing for today. Greener spoke slowly. "In other words, Germany will become the German state?" "That's right." Rothschild smiled. "What about France? The French state?" "Haha, what about Poland?" "Of course it's the Polish state." "Haha." As if he had heard a big joke, Greener raised his head and laughed, took 2 steps back, and suddenly spat fiercely on the edge of his shoes. "Hitler really should kill all of you idiots. I have never prayed so hard that he would crawl out of his grave." Leaving this cruel word, Greener pulled his coat from the chair, turned around and walked towards the door of the conference room without looking back. He opened the door of the conference room, but froze. Blood slowly flowed from the door into the room, soaking the soles of his shoes and freezing his vision. Outside the meeting room, a white man stared with disbelief, with a dagger-torn throat. "Your bodyguard is strong, but that's all." Johnson grinned, leaned against the door, and wiped the blood off the dagger with his hand. "How is it possible?" Glenn squeezed out these words from his throat, turned stiffly, and his eyes met the black muzzle of the gun. Bang! The fire flashed, the gunshot rang out, and Glenn fell to the ground. The muzzle of the revolver in his hand was smoking, and Rothschild looked directly at the unbelievable face with a smile. "For the glory of Freemasonry, please die." Cough. Greener coughed up a mouthful of blood. He stared at his former best friend with bloodshot pupils. "The Krupp family will not let you go. You will not succeed." "Really?" Carmen squatted down and looked down at Greener's face. "Unfortunately, when you went to this building, your brother had already taken the position of the new chairman of the Krupp group." At this point, Carmen paused for 2 seconds and then added a sentence to emphasize. "With the help of Rothschild Bank." Greener's eyes widened, and the anger in his pupils was not sure whether it was because of the betrayal of his relatives or the hatred of the name of Rothschild. The muzzle of the gun gently gestured on his chin. Carmen stared into his eyes and suddenly sighed. "My friend, I gave you a chance, but you didn't have to do this. If we had reached an agreement just now, today would have been a different ending." "I curse you." Glenner interrupted Carmen, and blood gushed out of his mouth, staining his white teeth blood red. "I curse your family, you will go to hell. Tortured by Satan." Carmen nodded slightly. "My friend, you don't have to tell me, we will meet again in hell, but you will go first." Carmen gently placed the pistol on his chest, reached out and slowly closed his wide eyes, and took off the blood-stained ring from his stiff finger. Besides, how could Satan punish us believers? Putting away the ring symbolizing the membership of the 33rd degree, Carmen smiled self-deprecatingly and stood up. With his back to his former friend, he looked at Johnson at the door expressionlessly. Clean this place up. Even if he is abandoned, he is the former head of the Krupp family and deserves the respect of his allies. Yes. Johnson nodded slightly and left. In the northwestern suburbs of Donetsk in eastern Ukraine, the ruins here have been successfully turned into a front line full of trenches and bunkers. Fortunately, some time ago, Russian field engineers helped these civilian armed forces to take care of their fortifications in a decent manner, so that the war situation would not become too tragic. With the support of EMP weapons shipped from the Russian-Ukrainian border, the civilian armed forces once successfully pushed the front line to the east bank of the Dnieper River, but now they have taken a sharp turn and fallen into an embarrassing situation. Walking 10 kilometers behind the front line, Natasha, wrapped in a thick coat, met the informant who was responsible for contacting her Skanov, an officer of the Ukrainian government army, and handed him a document from Moscow and a box of crumpled cigars. Skanov grinned, the crow's feet at the corners of his eyes cracked like spider webs. He took out a cigar from the cigar box and lit it, then casually put the documents into his arms. Give my regards to your father, and tell old Skanov to thank him for his gift. Natasha exhaled a puff of white mist, her eyes swept through the shadows between the ruins, and she said absent-mindedly, I will. 3 years have passed. Even when she occasionally returned to Ukraine, she only moved around in the relatively safe Crimea. This was the first time she was so close to the front line in 3 years. The change in the environment had made her somewhat unrecognizable, and the cold air made her feel unexpectedly unfamiliar. Even she herself was surprised. She had gotten used to that small island in the Western Pacific, and that man who was sometimes wise and sometimes naive. If it weren't for the drastic changes a few days ago, she should be on vacation on a private island now. Skanov grinned and joked. Thinking about men. Natasha glanced at him coldly. How is the situation on the front line? Putting out the cigar with his thumb, Skanov stuffed the half-smoked cigar back into his dirty pocket, as if nothing had happened. The Future Group once destroyed the Masonic Arrowhead Military Company in Madagascar, and we once thought they destroyed it. But in fact, the Freemasons just moved it back to North Africa from South Africa. And now, it is in Europe, across from us, or you. NATO promised not to send troops to Ukraine, so the mercenaries standing across from them are not bound by laws and international conventions, and most of these mercenaries come from refugee shelters on the borders of Sweden, Norway, and Finland. No one expected that this refugee shelter, jointly funded by major European consortiums and built after the Munich massacre, would become a source of troops for European consortiums. In order to get their families out of the cruel and cold refugee camps, they performed extremely tenaciously on the battlefield. Natasha's expression showed a trace of solemnity. You are so smart, you should have guessed it. Skanov smiled. The integration of the European Union and the new puppets have made many things that were originally incredible become logical. I don't understand how the European Union can be unified. Natasha shook her head. What's impossible? Skanov shook his head and said indifferently, although until a week ago, I also thought they were joking. The civilian armed forces are no longer the weak and incompetent Ukrainian government forces, but well-trained, well-equipped, and tactically sophisticated private armed forces. The Faraday spray they bought from the other side of the Atlantic in the name of anti-terrorism has been used on tank armor on a large scale, which is an effective countermeasure to the EMP weapons in our hands. Without this trump card, we can only pin our hopes on the brave and fearless citizens of Donetsk. Faraday spray is a tactical anti-EMP weapon developed by the Advanced Research Projects Agency of the US Department of Defense. By spraying droplets with special content and diameter, a simple Faraday cage is formed within the range of the white mist, which protects the electronic equipment wrapped in it from damage by EMP weapons. This weapon is not very technical, but it is unexpectedly effective in restraining electromagnetic pulses, and has been tested in actual combat in the Second Mindanao War. Is there no way to sanction them? Natasha said with a frown. Although Russia has secretly sent its own soldiers disguised as civilians to Ukraine, to support civilian armed forces. This practice is ultimately not acceptable. Most of these soldiers who participated in the war served as instructors and military advisors, and rarely participated in the frontal battlefield. After all, if a Russian died in Ukraine, it would be difficult to explain. Skanov shook his head. International law cannot sanction them, because in principle they do not belong to any country, but are only employed by the Ukrainian government. At this point, Skanov paused for a moment and said thoughtfully, unless another mercenary is sent to fight them. Chapter 986 A Solitary Boat. After putting on the helmet and carefully checking each seatbelt, Liu Qingpeng reached out and opened the instrument in the cockpit. He took several deep breaths in a row, trying to make his expression look less stiff. He reached out and touched the side of the helmet. A row of light blue light screens instantly spread out in front of his field of vision, and a strange and ordinary female face appeared in front of him. Navigator number 01 is at your service. Are you nervous? Liu Qingpeng smiled reluctantly. What do you think? You'd better control your heart rate, which will help avoid accidents. In order to save as much fuel as possible, you will complete the acceleration steps on the runway. How many Gs? 20.1 G. Can you apply for the Guinness World Record for me? Liu Qingpeng smiled bitterly. The guide said without any sense of humor. No, this flight is a top secret mission. Unless you are willing to try again, after you come back. Let's talk about this, after I come back. The guide said in an affirmative tone. You will? You will? Liu Qingpeng didn't believe it at all. No one was more familiar with the machine under his crotch than he was. The flight distance of 30 million kilometers was dozens of times beyond the normal cruising radius of the electric ray X1, and it was a very dangerous flight outside the Earth-Moon system. Even if there was a quantum computer to guide him alone, his chance of survival was only 1 in 10. What he was most worried about was not that he could not catch up with the Earth, but that he would not be able to slow down and change orbit due to insufficient fuel during the return flight, and eventually brush past the Earth-Moon system and become a lonely ghost in the solar system. All the sacrifices were just to go up and take a look. But he didn't regret it, because he took the mission himself. Finally, he took a deep breath of the air in the starring city and resolutely pressed the takeoff button next to the joystick. The mechanical arm pulling the electric ray A1 moved slowly, grabbed it from the parking area, and stuck it into the dark runway. The signal lights on the runway were turned on one after another, but they still couldn't illuminate the hundreds of kilometers long runway. Blue arcs began to cruise around the edge of the aircraft. In order to prevent retinal detachment, Liu Qingpeng chose to close his eyes. Whenever he lay on this runway, he felt like a cannonball that was stuffed into the barrel of an electromagnetic gun. The navigator's voice, without any fluctuations, rang in his ears. Ejection countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. An instant tearing sensation came from every inch of cells. Liu Qingpeng clenched his teeth and used his willpower to resist the tearing of the acceleration, while silently counting down in his heart. The torment lasted for a full minute, and the force squeezing his shoulders suddenly loosened. When he opened his eyes again, the starring city behind him had turned into a round wheel, and he was already in the brilliant starry sky. From a distance, at the launch port in the center of the starring city, the blue arc only flashed briefly for a moment, and a black dot was thrown into the vast universe. Compared to the entire Earth, this electric ray is like a lone boat pushed into the deep sea, small and fragile. The Earth civilization, like a child in the sea of stars, reached out its tender hands to the unknown existence for the first time. Before he had time to cherish the memory of the Earth that was gradually going away, the voice of the navigator sounded in his ears again. Check the weapon system. Understood. Liu Qingpeng pressed the red button next to the joystick, and two thick and long round tubes popped out from under the electric ray A1, slowly opening to the wings. At the same time, under the command of the navigator, he opened the safety and pressed his thumb on the joystick twice. The dazzling white light flashed, and several laser beams as thick as thighs rushed away and disappeared into the darkness in the distance. The weapon system is normal. Reporting to the navigator, Liu Qingpeng reached out and turned off the safety. Although his mission was just to get closer and take a look, no one could guarantee that the UFO had good intentions. The Electric Ray A1 is equipped with the most powerful extraterrestrial attack weapon currently available to starring trade, the Model A attack module designed by Doomsday Pan-Asia. If a UFO shows aggressive behavior after he approaches, starring trade allows him to judge whether to fire back, based on the situation. After getting rid of the gravity of the Earth-Moon system, Liu Qingpeng opened the throttle of the engine and accelerated towards the mission mark in his field of vision. When the speed stabilized above the second cosmic speed, he immediately turned off the throttle and began a long wait. It would take 2.6 million seconds to catch up with the UFO, which is nearly a month in days. This small aircraft naturally cannot have a complete ecological cycle function. With sufficient electricity, the stored fresh water, liquid food, and oxygen are only enough to last for about 15 days. However, starring trade specially modified a hibernation chamber for his vehicle, during which he will spend a long period of time in sleep. When approaching the target, the ground command center will naturally wake him up. Of course, another possibility is not ruled out. That is because of force majeure, such as the target suddenly accelerating and changing its position, causing him to pass by it. When the ground command center determines that his remaining fuel can no longer help him catch up with the target, it will wake him up in advance to return home. The temperature in the cabin began to drop, and the life support device injected a special cell stabilizer into Liu Qingpeng's body. His hands left the joystick. His field of vision began to blur, and finally fell into darkness. In the ground command center, Jiang Chen frowned as he watched the Electric Ray A1 successfully enter orbit, and his clenched fists gradually loosened. Although he had entrusted this matter to Kerwin, he couldn't help but come to the command center on the day when the volunteer set sail, and watch the hero fly away. "It's over." Kerwin nudged Jiang Chen with his elbow, and reminded him in a low voice. Jiang Chen nodded, said nothing, and finally glanced at the Electric Ray A1 on the holographic screen, turned around and walked out of the command room. Although there has been no contact with the UFO, this sighting has had a far-reaching impact on the scientific research strategy of starring trade. According to Jiang Chen's instructions, Kerwin immediately increased the research budget of the interstellar navigation engine, and at the same time, included extraterrestrial attack methods in the scientific research sequence for the first time. Jiang Chen originally planned to slow down. After all, the existing theoretical science is not enough to support too powerful weapons technology. Just like black powder to a musket. If the formula of gunpowder had not been studied, no matter how much the ancient craftsmen studied weapons, they could only sharpen bows and spears, but could not produce firearms that were better than these. Before the breakthrough of magnetic confinement technology in the end times, laser weapons were generally regarded as the most promising way of extraterrestrial attack. The A-type attack module designed by Pan-Asia was also designed based on this concept. However, after the breakthrough of magnetic confinement technology, plasma cannons that directly emit high-temperature plasma have become a more promising choice. However, now, sharpening bows and spears has become an imminent choice. Regardless of whether the UFO is hostile or not, the starring trade, which represents the Earth civilization, to open up the starry sky, must never show weakness. Chapter 987 Invitation from Moscow. After leaving the ground command center, Jiang Chen took a helicopter back to the future building on Koro Island. When he stepped onto the rooftop helipad and returned to the office, leaning back on the boss chair, Jiang Chen picked up the documents on the table. At this time, Asia's figure appeared behind him, and she gently placed her hands on his shoulders, pinching them lightly and heavily. With a smile on his lips, Jiang Chen flipped through the documents in his hand about China Heavy Industries application for leasing the space station interface, and said, "Is there any new situation in Europe?" Asia shook her head with some regret. "We are a step late. Greener Krupp is dead." His body was seen by a farmer in the farm machinery warehouse on the outskirts of Frankfurt the morning before yesterday. He was shot in the chest, and no one knows why he appeared there. Now the head of the Krupp family is his younger brother, Leon Krupp. If there is anyone who can organize Carmen, it is probably the Krupp family, which represents the Prussian aristocracy in Germany. Their achievements in the industrial field are equivalent to Rothschilds in finance. Since the Prussian era, whether it is a large factory or a handicraft workshop, they all like to put the Krupp logo on the barrel to indicate that they use high quality gun steel from Krupp, which shows its far-reaching influence. Not everyone likes to see Europe move towards unity, or in other words, most people do not want to see this day. The Rothschild family can manipulate the new extreme right regimes in various countries and influence the thinking of some people through the media, but in the end they cannot avoid the Krupp family, who were born into traditional Prussian aristocrats, and Grüner Krupp, who is the Duke of Prussia. In Jiang Chen's plan, if Grüner Krupp can be won over, the Masonic alliance should be disintegrated from within, thus aborting the Rothschild family's plan. But now it seems that Carmen is not stupid enough to let go of the hidden danger around him, and killed Grüner Krupp before the ghost agent found him. Jiang Chen pinched his eyebrows with a headache. At this moment, his watch vibrated. Clicking on the holographic screen, it was a long-distance call from Moscow. Jiang Chen was slightly stunned, then pressed the answer button. "Hello. It's me," Natasha said. "I'm relieved to hear your voice. It seems that you didn't encounter any misfortune in Ukraine." Jiang Chen smiled and joked. "I'm very busy now, and I don't have time to joke." Natasha took a deep breath and continued. "There is something Russia wants to discuss with you." Jiang Chen tapped his fingers lightly on the table. "Go ahead, I'm listening. I'm not convenient to reveal the specific details over the phone. There will be a big shot to discuss this with you in detail. If it's convenient, can you come to Moscow? Brussels, Belgium, is the headquarters of the European Union. Since the EU foreign minister announced the controversial resolution to establish the European Union a week ago, reporters and protesters from all over the EU have gathered here. And today, because of a special meeting, the heads of government of many EU countries have gathered here. In order to avoid accidents, Belgium even dispatched the overseas famous Army Special Operations Group, SFG, to be responsible for security work. With the cooperation of the anti-riot police, the Belgian police successfully dispersed the protesters blocking the entrance of the EU headquarters, ensuring that this high-level meeting was successfully carried out to the end. After the meeting, with the bodyguards clearing the way, the leader of the new alternative party, German Prime Minister Petri, walked through the reporters from various countries with a serious face. Although the bodyguards blocked him, the microphones were still extended one after another. The police dared to drive away the mob, but they really didn't have the courage to drive away the reporters. "Mr. Prime Minister, what form will the EU integration take?" asked a British reporter. "It will be carried out as soon as possible, before our economic situation and employment rate get worse." Domestic political forces in many EU countries have expressed opposition, including conservative groups in Germany, which have clearly expressed their opposition to this resolution. "What choice will the new alternative party make in the future?" asked a reporter from a German TV station. "We will make them trust me," Petri said patiently. "Does the UK have any opinions on the EU's move towards unification?" asked a reporter from a Belgian newspaper. "Their opinions are not important. This is a matter for Europeans, not the British. They have already left the EU, and we have no intention of letting them come back. How will EU integration help Greece and other countries get rid of the debt crisis? Will the merger of the EU's territory further drag down the German economy with economically backward member states?" asked the reporter from the United States. "We will come up with an effective plan to help the unemployed find jobs, instead of squandering the euros borrowed from our bank." Finally getting rid of the difficult reporter, Petri let out a long breath and got into the black stretched car. This journey of only 50 meters made him feel tired, like running a marathon. Yes, it was tired. The New Choice Party was originally regarded as the successor of the far-right party NPD, because of its propositions such as leaving the Eurozone, restoring border control and shooting refugees. But now, not only did they not fulfill their campaign promises, but they overturned everything they had promised and chose to work with France to establish a unified EU. The opponents were not only himself, but also many voters who voted for them. He didn't know why he was standing here and voting for a proposal that he didn't agree with at all. But now that he has reached this position, many things are no longer up to him. The new alternative party is not the Christian Democratic Party of Germany. They are too young. They have only been in power for a few years and have not accumulated enough capital to negotiate with major European financial groups. The political power in their hands is not yet formed. They are simply vulnerable to the capital of the Rothschild financial group. Maybe Merkel once had the confidence to challenge that man, but he is not Merkel. He is just a puppet supported by the Rothschild family. The same puppets are almost everywhere in the Bundestag, the New Alternative Party, and even the army. If he dares to express any objection, stepping down may be the most decent ending. It has to be admitted that, although it is unknown how far this EU integration resolution can go, and how long it will last, the man named Carmen has completed half of the great cause that Napoleon, William II, and Hitler have not completed. He even began to regret a little, regretting the choice he made at the time. When Petri got in the car, an old man in a suit had been sitting in the car waiting for a long time. Seeing the German Chancellor, the old man nodded slightly to show respect. After the car door closed, Petri cleared his throat and spoke. The resolution to take back the right of the central banks of the Eurozone countries to speak in the European Central Bank system has been passed. The next step is for the European Central Bank to hold the central banks of various countries and gradually take back the right to speak on the issuance of the euro from the EU countries. You did a good job. The old man smiled slightly. Did anyone vote against it? The feeling of being stared at by a venomous snake made Petri's breathing stagnate slightly, but he soon returned to normal and shook his head. Except for 2 abstentions, no one opposed it. The old man smiled and nodded. Out of uneasiness about the fate of the country, Petri asked, "Do you think this is really a good thing?" When the old man looked over, he quickly added, "I mean, from an economic perspective, centralizing the right to issue the euro may increase the economic burden on Greece, Italy, Vineyard and other countries." The old man just smiled and did not answer the question. The EU will be more dynamic than before, both in terms of economy and influence. Petri shrugged, looked away and stopped talking. For a moment, he had the illusion that this entrepreneur or butler trained by the Rothschild consortium was more like a politician. Chapter 988 Preparations before departure. If it's convenient, can you come to Moscow? After thinking for a moment, Jiang Chen did not refuse Natasha's invitation. He needed to go there in person to make a decision. It must be an issue that is not convenient to discuss over the phone, nor is it convenient to appoint diplomats to discuss. And his intuition told him that the content of the discussion must be related to the recent precarious situation in Europe. Russia is one of the strategic partners of starring trade. The cooperation between the two sides in the economic field is second only to China, and the cooperation in the military field is even higher than that of China. From this perspective alone, he really needs to go there in person. The unification of Europe is also not in the interests of starring trade. After hanging up the phone, Jiang Chen looked at Aisha, gently held her face with his hand, smiled and whispered, "Thank you for your trouble." "Don't worry." Aisha's hand gently covered Jiang Chen's hand, rubbed her cheek gently, closed her eyes and whispered, "It's my honor to share your worries." Shouldn't this be said by a gentleman to a lady? Jiang Chen teased. Aisha smiled slightly, activated the optical invisibility, and hid her figure in the office. Ever since she played a virtual reality standalone game called Assassin's Creed, Phantom in the Phantom Helmet, she seemed to have fallen in love with this way of saying goodbye by stealth. A soft touch came from her forehead, and soon a gust of wind blew past the door of the office. Jiang Chen reached out and touched his forehead, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. This little girl secretly kissed him when she left. The further east you go, the weaker the influence of Freemasonry, but even the KGB cannot guarantee that there is no Freemasonry in Moscow, the capital of Eastern Europe. Risks and benefits coexist. In order to ensure the safety of the trip to Moscow, Aisha will go to Moscow first. Without offending allies, make the most of the intelligence network established by ghost agents in the local area to clear potential dangers for Jiang Chen's visit. The date of the visit was set for a week later, in the name of discussing submarine power transmission cables. Before going to Russia, Jiang Chen was not completely idle, but returned to the end of the world. In early April, the heavy snow over Wanhei city finally stopped a little, and the snow covering the ruins of the city also showed signs of melting. Last year's winter came earlier than usual, and left much later than usual. The entire Earth is like a computer that has been overwhelmed by various countries. After running for hundreds of years, it was finally restarted because of the nuclear war that affected the whole world. The facts confirmed the speculation of the Church of Twilight. After many years of silence, the world ushered in a small ice age far exceeding that of the Middle Ages. A disaster caused by nuclear winter, wrapped in howling wind and snow, swept the entire Earth. During the coldest days, Jiang Chen basically spent it in the present world, only occasionally coming back to accompany the girls to eat hot pot, so he didn't have a very intuitive feeling of how harsh last winter was. According to Sun Jiao, Wanghai City and the Yazhou Island colony were relatively okay, but many survivors in Hangcheng and Wu City, which went inland, froze to death. The little ice age did have some impact on the development of the 6th district. This survivor settlement, which claims to be a trade center and connects the north and the south, has been stained with a shadow of depression due to the impact of last year's cold winter. Although the market in the 6th district still maintains a considerable degree of vitality due to the irreplaceable food trade, the population growth has slowed down. People are more inclined to look for a suitable place to survive in the south. At this moment, Jiang Chen understands why the Northern Union District is willing to stretch its already fragile supply lines and force itself to declare itself. It's not that they are crazy, but they have no choice. Inheriting the armed forces of the pre-war Pan-Asian Cooperation and uniting the mutants who fled from Hangcheng to the vicinity of Wu City, they once succeeded. If it weren't for the breakthrough in magnetic confinement technology, combined with the powerful industrial capacity of the 6th district, the frontline troops successfully equipped with plasma cannons, they might have already gained a foothold in Wu City, and now they might be attacking Hangcheng, or even driving tanks to the doorstep of Nakhang City. However, there are not so many ifs. When Jiang Chen returned to the end of the world, the expected welcome did not happen, and the villa was quiet. Sun Jiao and Sun Jiao needed to take care of the marshal's mansion for him when he returned to the present world. Although Sun Jiao, who was used to being casual, hated these troubles, she could bear it for Jiang Chen. As for Linling, she happened to be away from Camp 27 for a search. In other words, the only one left at home was Yao, who stayed in her boudoir every day. And this information was exactly what Jiang Chen heard from the little girl. Can you get off my legs? Jiang Chen scratched his cheek a little embarrassedly with the soft jade in his arms. At the moment, Yao, wearing a floral dress and pajamas, sat on his legs with a happy face, happily swinging her 2 little feet wrapped in white silk, and even the little rabbit slippers were kicked aside by her. A light fragrance came along with the fluffy hair, the soft voice seemed to carry a sweet fragrance, and the watery eyes like a little deer flashed with hope that was simply irresistible. Can you hold me for a little longer, Yao? Turning her head slightly, Yao begged in a low voice. No problem. As long as you want. Jiang Chen replied immediately. Yes, it was impossible to refuse. Even Jiang Chen, who occasionally showed the S-side hidden deep in his heart, could not bear to see the lonely expression on the little angel's face. Thinking that there was nothing to do anyway, Jiang Chen sighed, rubbed Yao's hair lovingly, and silently repeated I'm not a lala to control more than a dozen times in his heart, and decided to stay with the little girl for a while. Feeling the warmth coming from her head, Yao's expression on her face became more satisfied, and she hummed happily. The sound of the current running and the chassis was looming, and Jiang Chen looked around Yao's boudoir. Over the years, almost nothing here has changed, except for the bed and furniture being replaced with new products imported from Singapore. The pink girlish wallpaper and the electronic components that exude a metallic smell are still so out of place. There are more and more books on the bookshelf, and Jiang Chen is overwhelmed just by looking at the names. I think they should be high-end computer professional books. While sighing at Yao's growth, Jiang Chen couldn't help but stroke her hair and sighed. Come to think of it, Yao hasn't grown at all. Woo. Being poked in the sore spot, her little shoulders trembled. Yao's mouth slightly pouted, and her throat whimpered in frustration. You will definitely not grow taller if you stay in the room all the time. Remember to go out and exercise more, at least get some sun in the backyard. At this point, Jiang Chen suddenly realized that the yellow-green sunlight that penetrated the radioactive dust seemed to be less healthy than the indoor light. Yao buried her little head in a somewhat aggrieved manner and murmured softly, "Woo. Big brother, don't you like girls with smaller bodies? This is no longer in the category of smaller, it's not an exaggeration to say that it's childish. And the point is not this at all, okay?" Jiang Chen couldn't help but tap her head lightly with his fingers. "I'm worried about your health. Why did you think about that?" Hehe. Putting her hands together, covering the big hand that was gently stroking her head, Yao's mouth showed a sweet smile. Although she was scolded, she always felt warm in her heart. It's like the empty space has been filled. Chapter 989, Night Talk in the Study. Accompanying Yao in her room until 5 o'clock, Linling, who had returned from Camp 27, and Sun Jiao and Xiao Ro, who had finally finished a day's work, returned home one after another. Satisfied, Yao jumped off Jiang Chen's lap with a hey swoosh, took out an apron from the closet, and tied it on her petite body. "There will be delicious steamed sea bass tonight. Big brother can look forward to it. Hey." The little Lalita with a rosy face left this sentence, then turned around and trotted out the door. Listening to the cheerful tune coming from the corridor, Jiang Chen couldn't help but smile, got up and walked out of the girl's boudoir. When he came to the living room, he happened to run into Sun Jiao, who had just returned home. When she saw Jiang Chen, Sun Jiao immediately rushed over in surprise and kissed him hard on the face. Xiao Ro, who was standing aside, looked at the two people showing their affection with sparkling eyes and smiled softly with her hands covering her mouth. Only Linling couldn't stand it anymore. She complained about the two of them venomously, rolled her eyes, and hid back in the laboratory. Because Jiang Chen came back, the dinner was much more lively. After dinner, Jiang Chen helped Yao and Xiao Rao clean up the dishes, went to the third floor, and went straight to the study. When he opened the door, Sun Jiao was standing in front of the window, looking at this side with a smile. "I knew you would come here." She walked in front of Jiang Chen, stretched out her hand to hook his neck, and stared into his eyes with eyes flashing with longing. Jiang Chen closed the door behind him, hugged Sun Jiao, and took a few steps forward, kissed her deeply on the lips, looked back at her eyes full of longing, and smiled slightly. "Yes, I know you will definitely wait for me here. There's no one around now. Do you want to stay here? Let's stay until the evening." Sun Jiao's cheeks flushed a little. She curved the corners of her charming mouth, put her chin on Jiang Chen's shoulder, and closed her eyes happily. "Now, I just want to be held by you like this." Leaning against the window of the study, looking at the snow that was almost disappearing outside the window, Jiang Chen felt that the delicate body in his arms was particularly warm. Faintly, he heard a distant singing voice from this silence. "Is it singing outside?" Jiang Chen asked casually, looking at the brightly lit place outside the window. "It's a spring concert held by a large orchestra in the 6th block. The singing will last from 8 o'clock to 12 o'clock in the evening. It's not very clear here. If you are interested, I can accompany you to watch it live," Sun Jiao said with a smile. "No, I'm not interested in concerts." Jiang Chen smiled and shook his head, "But it's good to hold more of these activities, especially in peacetime. With more and more supplies, the lives of the survivors are getting richer. When they don't need to carry guns to the front line, they have to find something to do to entertain themselves. Holding more of these cultural activities will continue to promote social stability and cultivate the awareness of civilized people among these survivors. There are quite a few female stars who have woken up from the pre-war period. Do you want me to hold a concubine selection contest for you?" Sun Jiao smiled mischievously and gently poked his soft spot with her fingers in Jiang Chen's arms. "Many people are very interested in your heroic deeds." "I don't have any heroic deeds." Jiang Chen coughed and looked away embarrassedly. Sun Jiao looked at him with a smile and said nothing. As the woman closest to him, she saw everything. Exterminating mutants, pacifying the alien tide, recovering the city center, destroying the runaway artificial intelligence, and the expedition to Hangcheng and Yuzhou. Each achievement alone is enough to make a person proud for a lifetime. When all these halos are gathered on one person, no matter how modest he is worthy of the name of a hero in terms of his achievements. It has been like this for a long time. The stability of NAC has never relied on slave collars or citizen ranks, but on the personal prestige of the marshal. Let's not talk about this. By the way, is there any news from the Gravikeeper sect? Hearing Jiang Chen asking about serious matters, although Sun Jiao did not leave his arms, she also restrained her playful look a little and answered after thinking for a moment. They sent 50 technicians from Shangjing City. It is said that they were staff members who participated in the maintenance of the Holy Shield system before the war, and also participated in related projects of the research and development of colonial ship shield technology after the war. Hearing this, Jiang Chen couldn't help asking, didn't Pan Asia take these talents with them? The colony ship couldn't take everyone away, and there was no need to take everyone away. That's what Lu Minghu explained. Sun Jiao brushed off the topic and corrected the topic that was temporarily interrupted by Jiang Chen. At the beginning of last month, the repair work of the Holy Shield system in Wanghai City had already begun, but repairing such a city-level defense system cannot be completed overnight. How long will it take to complete? Jiang Chen asked. Sun Jiao shook her head. I don't know. Maybe this year, maybe next year, maybe never. But as of now, according to the feedback from our engineers, we haven't encountered any technical problems that cannot be solved yet. Jiang Chen nodded. The little ice age has arrived, and this winter will only be longer and more severe than last year. It would be best if the Holy Shield system can be completed before October. If not, we will have to work harder on cold weather. As a two-handed preparation, before he left last time, he had instructed Lu Huosheng to start cleaning up Wanghai City Metro Line 1 and allocate a portion of the budget from the loose finances to set up heating facilities, temporary living spaces, and spare necessities production workshops in the subway. If the living environment on the surface is too harsh, at least the civilians in the 6th block can be moved underground to spend the entire winter. By the way, a new shelter has been opened in the northern suburbs of Hangcheng recently. The director of the shelter has accepted our proposal and agreed to merge under the banner of NAC, but after accepting the current situation on the surface, he hopes to see you. Sun Jiao suddenly seemed to remember something and spoke. Really? Where is he now? Jiang Chen said with a smile. If he is nearby, it's fine. If he is far away, forget it. After all, he won't stay too long this time. In the 6th block. Jiang Chen nodded. It just so happens that I plan to visit my old friend in the 6th block tomorrow. Let him wait at the capital. The blueskins may be unworldly and may not be welcomed by the survivors, but for Jiang Chen, who hopes to rebuild order in this wasteland, these people are the most valuable resources in this wasteland. Even if they are not scientists, even if they are just ordinary people, they are well educated and have the unique reserve of civilized people that has long been lost in the ruins. The fire of civilization cannot be germinated simply by relying on guns and cannons. When these people who traveled from before the war successfully integrated into this post-war society, perhaps they can bring a precious and unique inspiration to NAC's path to the future. Based on this alone, Jiang Chen felt that he really needed to have a good chat with the director. Chapter 990, Mission of Shelter number 118. When the lights in the study went out, it was already late at night. From the moment Jiang Chen carried Sun Jiao into the bathroom, to the moment the creaking sound of the bed in the bedroom stopped, the clock had already passed the 12 o'clock position. Leaning against Sun Jiao, who was sleeping like a cat in his arms, Jiang Chen raised his hand to wipe the sweat from his forehead, and then he lay down on the pillow after a long breath. He turned off the lamp on the bedside table and pulled up the quilt. From the time he took a shower, he fell asleep quickly because he had consumed a lot of physical energy. There was no conversation that night. The next morning, after having breakfast with the girls, Jiang Chen, Sun Jiao, and Xiao Rao went out together. After sending the two girls to the community center, Jiang Chen took a short detour on the way to the helipad and walked towards the warehouse group of the Fishbone base. Although the Fishbone base is strictly a military zone, with the increase in population and the natural buff of the NAC capital, the development speed here is not inferior to any economic zone in the NAC territory. The concrete manifestation of this development is the ever-expanding warehouse complex and the crowds of people walking through the warehouse area. In Jiang Chen's memory, at first, there were only a few small warehouses where he stored the materials he brought from the real world, but now the area around here has completely become a distribution center for goods second only to the 6th block market. Not far away, the 2 airship ports built with steel skeletons are moving their thick and long mechanical arms to load goods for a helium airship that is about to go to Hangzhou. Most of the materials sent to Hangzhou are arms, and some are canned food, grains, etc. produced by Eden Garden. The young man who came directly to the warehouse complex and was responsible for driving the young C-51 immediately saluted him after seeing him, then jumped into the cockpit nimbly and started the engine, carrying him to the direction of the 6th block. The heavy snow has hindered the growth of the population, but it has not frozen the prosperity of the 6th block. Looking down from above, the area of the entire 6th block has expanded a circle compared to last year. Its territory almost covers the entire Jiading district, and the southernmost end has even spread to Qingpu North. The trade interrupted by the heavy snow has revived with this belated spring breeze. The wasteland merchants traveling between the north and south of China have flocked to it, making the market after the spring particularly lively. After getting off the helicopter, Jiang Chen went to the Parliament building. At this time, Chunan, Zhao Chenwu and other councillors of the 6th block were in a meeting, so Jiang Chen did not interrupt them abruptly. After chatting with the sheriff on duty, he came to the marshal's office on the top floor of the Parliament building. Except for the cleaning staff, who come here regularly every day to clean, this office is usually empty. It is located in the center of the top floor of the Parliament building, and exists as a symbol. Next door are the offices of the Speaker of the Parliament and the Executive Officer. Jiang Chen pulled out a small can of coffee beans from Jamaica Blue Mountain from his pocket, and threw it to Chunan's office secretary, asking her to make a pot of coffee, and send it to him, and then go find the new director of the shelter. Not long after waiting, a pot of fragrant coffee was placed on his desk. Jiang Chen slowly took the cup, and poured himself a cup. The thick white mist like gauze had not yet dissipated, when a polite knock came from the door. "Come in." The door opened, and a young man walked in. When he saw the pot of coffee on the table, his eyes widened with a slightly surprised expression, but he soon recovered from his surprise, and walked to the opposite side of Jiang Chen. "Please sit down," Jiang Chen said with a smile, making a gesture of invitation to the chair next to him, and at the same time, poured him a cup of coffee. "Thank you." The young man nodded politely. After sitting down and taking a sip of coffee, he said with some emotion, "The nostalgic taste reminds me of the morning before the nuclear war broke out. This thing should be very expensive in the end times." "That's right. After all, more than 20 years later, food-related things are almost expired, no matter how well they are preserved," Jiang Chen said with a smile. "I heard that you wanted to meet me. Now that you have met me, what do you think?" The young man nodded slightly. "Please allow me to introduce myself first. My name is Liu Yehe, the director of shelter number 118. When the door of shelter number 118 was just opened, we met the envoy sent by your side, and learned about everything that happened on the surface." At this point, Liu Yehe paused, and said with some emotion, "Before the gate opened, we had imagined the outcome of this war, but we didn't expect the final outcome to be like this. There is no victor, and there is no loser. That was more than 20 years ago." Jiang Chen smiled and glanced at the wall clock. "Is that all you want to tell me?" Liu Yehe shook his head. "No. To be precise, I'm going to give you something." As he spoke, he took off the pendant hanging around his neck and gently placed it on the table. Jiang Chen leaned forward slightly and looked at the pendant on the table. He saw that the silver ring was intricately carved with strange patterns, and in the center of the ring was a ruby the size of a grain of rice. No matter how you look at it, it is just an ordinary ornament. Jiang Chen's expression showed a trace of confusion, not understanding why he gave this thing to him. "What is it?" "This is a key." Liu Yehe looked at Jiang Chen and said, "It is also the mission of shelter number 118. Can you explain it in detail?" Jiang Chen asked. "Unlike most shelters that are social experiments, or simply for preserving populations, the purpose of our existence is only to leave a little hope for a potentially dark future. As he spoke, Lu Yihua extended his index finger and pointed at the table, gently pushing the key in front of Jiang Chen. At the bottom of Poang Lake next to Hangcheng, there is a completely dormant shelter numbered T7. In the dormant chambers of the shelter lie 2,000 researchers, whose expertise covers a total of 167 fields from particle physics to aerospace technology. They will spend the long river of time in slumber until someone opens the shelter and awakens them and their knowledge from the ruins. The T7 shelter is no longer part of the Global Shelter Plan project, and the construction party is the Pan-Asia Cooperative Scientific Research Institute. The plan is called Spark of Civilization. In the past few days in the 6th block, I have indeed seen the sprouts of civilization. I hope you can make good use of these scientific researchers to revive the glory of civilization on this land. The rice-sized ruby emitted a faint arc of light in the sunlight outside the window. Picking up the pendant from the table, Jiang Chen said solemnly, "Thank you." "You're welcome. I'm the one who should say thank you. I had originally planned to keep it as a family heirloom and pass it down 100 years later. I didn't expect that I would be able to complete my mission in my lifetime." Lu Yihua stood up, bowed slightly to Jiang Chen, then turned and left the marshal's office. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 991, Secret Talks in Frankfurt. In the present world, a manor in the suburbs of Frankfurt, Germany. A plain-looking black car stopped in front of the driveway of the manor. Two big men in suits came forward, checked the identity of the people in the car, and took out their walkie-talkies and whispered a few words. The checkpoint in front of the car slowly opened and let the car with the German chancellor in it pass. "What is the flashlight in their hands for?" Petri asked the old man sitting next to him. "Although it looks like a flashlight, it doesn't emit light at all. A tool for catching mice, especially invisible mice." The old man smiled slightly, lifted his sleeves, and looked at his watch. "Master Carmen will wait for you in the study. I have something to do later, so I won't go up with you." Petri smiled reluctantly and didn't answer. Just after returning from Belgium, he ran to the federal parliament without stopping and yelled for a long time with a group of aggressive idiots. He couldn't stand the pressure, so he had to forcibly disband the meeting and ask for help from his master behind the scenes, Carmen Rothschild. On the phone, Carmen did not tell him what to do immediately, but asked him to take time to come to the estate in Frankfurt. After hanging up the phone, Petri immediately asked his assistant to cancel his entire day's schedule and then rushed here in a hurry. "I'm almost driven crazy by those opposition parties now." Petri walked into Carmen's study with his head in his arms and threw a meeting record on his desk. "The Prussian Solidarity Party demands that the Prussian region hold a referendum and secede from the German Federation for independence. And that Germany's forward union demands that I resign immediately, otherwise I will be impeached in the federal parliament." He did not come empty-handed. The meeting record detailed the objections and political demands of the various opposition parties. If the differences between the various parties, trade unions and the ruling party are not resolved, perhaps before the European integration process begins, the German federal parliament may disintegrate on its own. Carmen had no intention of reading the record at all, but leaned back in the chair with his fingers crossed. "Don't be nervous, my dear Mr. Petri. We have an absolute advantage in Congress, and their impeachment will not succeed." Carmen looked in the direction of her butler. "Graham, go to the kitchen and inform them to prepare an extra set of tableaux for the table tonight." The old butler standing next to her nodded slightly, turned around and left the study. Seeing that the irrelevant people had left, Petri took a chair, sat opposite Carmen, and began to complain to his old friend. After so many years of getting along, he knew the character of his old friend very well. This bastard named Rothschild. Carmen did not hate his subordinates complaining about work problems to him, as long as they did not stand on the opposite side of him fundamentally. But the voices of doubt are not only from the opposition party. There are also voices in our new choice party that want me to explain, then go and explain it to them," Carmen said with a smile. Petri opened his mouth. What I wanted to say was that we should slow down the process of EU integration and soften the attitudes of those opponents by boiling the frog in warm water. After all, their angry faces now seem to be ready to start a revolution if they disagree with each other. From any angle, forcibly implementing this integration resolution is a reckless act. However, judging from the attitude of Mr. Carmen, he seems to have no intention of listening to advice at all. But this is impossible. You can never convince two people who don't want to be together to hold hands, just like no one can convince Germans and French to live under the same roof. Now the whole of Germany is against EU integration, and the same is true for our allies. My chief of staff can write a speech for me, but even if I'm eloquent, I can't turn black into white in front of all Germans. Carmen interrupted the distressed Petri and smiled patiently. You are wrong, my friend. Of course, black can be said to be white. Not only that, as long as you use the right method, you can even say that ugly is beautiful, humble is great, absurd is reasonable, and painful is happy. The only person who can do this is God. Petri said self-deprecatingly, and the person standing in front of you is just a poor man. Carmen shook his head. The fact is just the opposite. God has never succeeded in doing this. All those who have done this in history are people. Aha, dear Mr. Carmen, how are you going to say that the sky is green? Petri laughed, grabbed his hair with both hands, and said painfully, tell me, what should I do now? What you need to do is not to explain. Always remember that people are never creatures that can be persuaded, just like there is no truth in this world. Carmen shook his head, smiled and raised a finger. What you need to do is to give them a reason to believe. How to make a person believe that the sky is green. A colorblindness diagnosis is far more effective than an impassioned speech. Petri was stunned and looked at Carmen blankly. He felt as if a door had been pushed open in his head, and after that flash of inspiration, he seemed to grasp something. People are against us? Don't try to convince them to put aside their prejudices. Just give them a reason. We need a war, and then broadcast it on RTV, exaggerating the horror and cruelty of this war. If we want to find a target that can make the Germans and French share a common hatred of the enemy, Russia is undoubtedly a good choice. It just so happens that our Ukrainian brothers are in dire straits. We don't even need to make a new layout, we just need to make appropriate use of the topic. Carmen smiled and fiddled with the globe on the table and said, for example, let the people believe that the crisis of invasion is imminent, and Ukraine is the outpost of Europe. We are unified not for the selfish desires of capitalists or the ambitions of those in power, but to unite and resist the common enemy of Europe. Don't forget your identity. The New Choice Party is an extreme right-wing political party. Carmen patted his chest with the back of his hand. Unemployment, economic crisis, refugee problems, energy shortages. Use your imagination and blame everything on the Russians. Remember, not only federal parliamentarians, but also the mouthpiece of the mainstream European media is in our hands. Hearing this, Petri felt that his brain was clearer than ever, and he had understood what he should do. As for what to do specifically, Carmen pointed to her head. Think here, think carefully, and if you can't think of it, find someone to think for you. Who to find? Petri was stunned and asked subconsciously. Belgium is one of the countries with the highest welfare in the EU member states. You mean, let me go to the president of Belgium to exchange ideas? Petri frowned slightly. No. What you need is not to exchange ideas with the president of Belgium, but a new advisor. Go to Belgium to find those immigrants with big brains. Some of them happened to be good at this before they immigrated to us. Chapter 992, Treasure buried deep in the lake. In the middle of Poang Lake, several boats painted with MAC symbols were quietly parked on the lake. Soldiers wearing exoskeletons stood on the side of the boats, holding rifles, carefully alerting the underwater situation. In this wasteland, places with water are always more dangerous than places without water. Behind every water plant, there may be mud crabs. These alien species covered with heavy armor will not benefit even the death claws. Wearing a black power armor, Jiang Chen stood at the bow and glanced at the bottomless lake. The clear lake surface was slowly rippling with disciplined ripples. If there was no solid intelligence, no one would believe that such an amazing secret was buried under this lake. 2,000 scientists covering various research fields. This treasure is too important for Jiang Chen. After a while, a knight walked behind him and bowed his head respectfully. Observers have already scanned with life detection equipment, and there are no signs of mud crabs within a mile. Our people are also ready and can set off at any time. Then let's set off now, Jiang Chen ordered. Yes. Fists collided with the steel breastplate, making a clean sound. Hu Cheng saluted respectfully and turned to receive the order. Under the leadership of the Knight, 5 soldiers wearing amphibious mechanical exoskeletons quickly gathered at the bow, and with a command, they jumped into the lake one after another. Jiang Chen stood at the bow and waited quietly until the underwater advance team confirmed that the lake bottom was safe, and then stepped into the lake. As a single soldier armor that can pass through nuclear radiation areas, the average water depth is only 10 meters, which is naturally no problem for T3 power armor. After a while, Jiang Chen's feet stepped firmly on the soft lake bottom. 1 or 2 mutant fish swam over, gnawing at the steel shell with their crooked teeth. Jiang Chen waved his hand to drive away these mutant creatures who were overconfident, and walked towards the position marked on the holographic screen. Like most shelters, the entrance of this unorganized shelter was a circle with a diameter of more than 10 meters. However, it was not embedded in the wall, but embedded in the bottom of the lake covered with aquatic plants. The years have not left any traces of rust on it, and the shiny alloy seems to have been cast yesterday. In the center of this circular giant door, the words T7 were painted. This is it. A string of bubbles burst out from the gap in the armor. Jiang Chen looked at the knight who was also wearing power armor and nodded. He took out the ruby pendant from his waist and walked towards the center of the steel giant door. Let me do it. Hu Cheng hurriedly stepped forward to stop the marshal and volunteered. As a knight of Nak, how could he let the marshal take risks? However, Jiang Chen just shook his head. It's okay. It's unlikely that there are any mechanisms here. The entire 118 shelter has been incorporated under the banner of Nak. Lu Yehua has no reason to lie to himself. Only graves need mechanisms to guard them. If it is to send knowledge and hope to the future, then the people who built this shelter have no reason to put weapons in it. In the center of the steel giant door, as Lu Yehua described, you can see a circular concave. Jiang Chen put the silver disc at the end of the pendant on it and gently rotated it half a circle to the right. The ruby embedded in the center of the disc is the core of the key. After a special gem processing technology, the construction direction of the shelter is engraved with a password of more than 10 gigabytes. The secret key made by this encryption method cannot be deciphered even by the computing power of an experimental quantum computer. The electric current flows along the silver disc and passes through the ruby. A string of bubbles densely emerges from the edge of the circular steel giant door and rushes towards the lake. With a slight tremor, the giant door began to sink slowly. Something is not right here. Marshal, please come out first. Hu Cheng quickly stepped forward to protect Jiang Chen, looking around nervously. The 5 soldiers wearing amphibious exoskeletons around him also nervously raised their underwater rifles, alert to possible threats. Don't be nervous, it's just an elevator. Jiang Chen smiled and shook his head, stretched out his hand to press down the muzzle of Hu Cheng's gun, and signaled everyone not to be nervous. Everyone slowly sank with the steel giant door. In less than half a minute, the giant door that originally protruded from the surface had turned into a deep pit. When the giant door sank to a certain height, the entire giant door clicked like a bullet entering the chamber and fixed there. The top of the deep pit began to close, like a dome covering everyone's head, sealing the exit. When the dome was completely closed, the signal light in the deep pit lit up, lighting up the entire space. Then, the water level began to drop, and only after it was completely emptied, did the vertical well wall slowly move open a door. So this thing is not a door, but an elevator. He looked around, and saw steep steel walls everywhere. Hu Cheng put away the underwater rifle in his hand, muttered to himself, took off the tactical rifle from his waist, and held it in his hand. At this time, Jiang Chen had already walked to the open iron door. But just as he was about to step through the door, he stopped with a slight frown. On the open iron door, he saw a familiar logo. He reached out and gently touched the raised badge. His soft alloy-covered fingertips followed the lines and swept away the dust on the outline. If he remembered correctly, the company that owned this trademark had a resounding name. East Asia Heavy Industry. Jiang Chen retracted his hand and muttered the name. What's wrong? Hu Cheng, wearing steel armor, walked to his side with dull steps, picked up the flashlight, and shone it into the darkness behind the door, but apart from a long and narrow corridor, he could not see anything special. Where is the pendant? Take it down and give it to me. Jiang Chen turned his head and looked at the knight who came down with him and ordered. Yes. Hu Cheng nodded respectfully, walked back to the center of the huge circular door, bent down, took the pendant out of the groove, and handed it to Jiang Chen. After taking the pendant from the knight, Jiang Chen waved to the soldiers behind him, signaling them to follow, and then walked into the corridor. Under the leadership of Hu Cheng, 6 people held rifles and steadily protected Jiang Chen on both sides. Soon, the group came to the end of the corridor. Jiang Chen took out the key again and placed it on the card reader of an alloy door. After reading the code in the ruby, the alloy door slowly opened, and the cold lights that opened in sequence illuminated the dark space. Gradually seeing the spectacular scene behind the door, Jiang Chen's pupils gradually enlarged and bloomed with surprise. Like a terracotta warrior, in a space of tens of thousands of square meters, there are about 2,000 oval dome chambers. The white shell is like a life-sized goose egg placed at an angle, entangled by pipes as thick as forearms, entangled with the central main control computer and life support devices. This is not a shelter, but a time machine. From the past decades ago to the future today, it carries the fire of civilization. Wait for me here. After leaving these words, Jiang Chen walked towards the giant egg closest to him with unspeakable excitement in his heart, and reached out to press the button with the words, "End hibernation." The smooth shell opened a neat crack, and cold white mist sprayed out from the crack. Like a cocoon reborn, the shell of the dormant chamber slowly opened, revealing the girl lying in the shell, with skin as smooth as mutton fat jade. However, when he saw the person's face clearly, Jiang Chen's excitement was immediately like being poured with a basin of cold water and quickly cooled down. Suddenly thinking of something, he raised his head and looked at the central control computer. This familiar device. As if confirming his guess, the cold and silent display screen slowly lit up, and a man in a suit appeared in the center of the screen. He sat in an office chair, with the night view of Wanghei City before the wall behind him. That expressionless face seemed to show little interest in everything. "Hello, future friend. Looking at your expression, have you seen me somewhere before?" Chapter 993. Like a blank paper. More than that, Jiang Chen couldn't forget that face, even if it was burned to ashes, as well as the brain floating in the culture tank, and the Supreme buried with it. "We meet again, Dr. Lin Minji." Looking at the man on the screen, Jiang Chen sighed with some emotion, took the code from the open hibernation chamber, and covered the girl with it. "I thought you were dead, but I didn't expect you were still alive." Although he was much younger than the last time he saw him in the underground shelter in Wanghei City, Jiang Chen could still recognize his identity from the limited facial features. The girl lying in the hibernation chamber also made Jiang Chen's expression a little complicated. Almost at the same time as the screen lit up, Hu Cheng made a gesture and rushed to Jiang Chen with the soldiers behind him. When passing by Jiang Chen, he quickly glanced at the face of the girl in the hibernation chamber. A trace of surprise flashed in his eyes, but he soon made the decision to pretend that he had seen nothing and conscientiously focused all his attention on the man on the screen in front of the gun. Although he didn't know who this person was, his intuition as a subordinate told him that the relationship between the man on the screen and the marshal was not very harmonious. "Lin Minji. That's indeed my name." As if he didn't see the muzzles of guns pointed at him at the door, the man raised his head and looked at the non-existent ceiling and sighed as if he was lost in memory. "Correction. Whether I'm alive or not is still up for debate." Up for debate. Hearing this, Jiang Chen frowned slightly and slowly lowered the rifle in his hand. "Are you calm now? No matter what conflict you have with that person, you don't have to be angry with the program, right?" Lin Minji spread his hands and made a helpless expression in a very human way. "I was born in 2168 and was completed almost at the same time as this shelter, and the prototype of my personality, appearance, and everything else is the programmer who wrote me. Can I ask a question?" Jiang Chen asked. "Of course." Lin Minji nodded slightly. Answering your questions is the meaning of my existence. What level of artificial intelligence are you? Elementary? Intermediate? Or of course it's elementary. Lin Minji smiled. For a commentator, thinking about this kind of thing is just a burden. Jiang Chen was silent for a long time and ordered Hu Cheng on the communication screen. Take your people out first and wait for me outside. Hu Cheng was stunned and said hurriedly, but this is an order. Jiang Chen blocked his words with an irresistible tone. Wait for me at the elevator. Unless it's my order, you are not allowed to come in. For the night, the marshal's order is absolute. Although he was still worried about his safety, Hu Cheng couldn't say anything else, so he had to reluctantly lower his head and agreed. Yes. Raising his hand and gesturing to the soldiers in the team, Hu Cheng led his people to the corridor. Standing at the door, he looked at Jiang Chen's back with some hesitation, but he still obeyed the order and led his people to the elevator. After the footsteps faded away, Jiang Chen was silent for a moment, then asked, "Tell me, what exactly are you planning? Leave a spark for civilization. These clones, are they what you call sparks?" Jiang Chen moved his rifle to the side, pointed at the girl who was looking at him with innocent eyes, and said in a cold tone, "Or is this another disgusting experiment?" The girl lying in the hibernation chamber at the moment looked exactly like Linling. If this is not a special case, the scientists lying in the more than 2,000 hibernation chambers are probably copies of Linling. Hearing Jiang Chen's words, Lin Minji shook his head. "You misunderstood." "Misunderstood? In my database, the entry about the spark of civilization plan did not find any words related to the experiment. The human woman lying in front of you now is a clone born from the somatic cells of Linling through somatic cell cloning technology. Her name is Lin Yi, number 0001. Jiang Chen was very curious. If the name of number 0001 was Lin Yi, then what was the name of number 0100 or number 1000? But these were not the main points. He just wanted to know one thing now. While Linling, Jiang Chen asked the question in his heart with a complicated expression. Maybe it's because of the father's guilt for his daughter? Or maybe it's because of something else? Lin Minji shrugged and said in a tone that it had nothing to do with him. The master who created me didn't tell me these unnecessary things. I'm afraid I can't help you think about the answer to this question. As for why clones were used, I think even if I don't say it, combined with the time when this shelter was completed, you should be able to get the answer. Jiang Chen was slightly stunned, but soon understood what he meant. The outbreak of World War III is in 2171. This unorganized shelter was built in 2168, before the outbreak of the war. Considering the global economic crisis at the time and the existence of the Scientific Ethics Committee, it was almost impossible to select a group of volunteers from scientists to go to the future. From this perspective, choosing clones to pass on the torch of civilization seems to be a helpless choice under the background of the times. Although it also violates scientific taboos, at least the cultivation of clones can be carried out secretly. However, Jiang Chen still has a question that he doesn't understand. I don't understand why we must use people as the carrier of information instead of more efficient machines. A mobile hard disk can definitely carry more information than the human brain. And unlike humans, machines are born without understanding what forgetting is. Even if it has been tens of thousands of years, as long as the parts themselves are not oxidized, knowledge can be passed on intact. You are not the first person to ask this question. My designer has also said this to himself, but unfortunately I can't give you a standard answer. Lin Minji spread his hands. For reference, I can only tell you the conclusion drawn by the researchers of the Spark of Civilization project team. Hard disks can pass on knowledge, but only people can be the carrier of civilization. After a pause, Lin Minji continued. Their souls are like a blank sheet of paper. Apart from the knowledge imparted in the virtual reality program, their cognitive and learning abilities are almost the same as those of newborn babies. As long as you are willing to accept them, they will adapt to the outside world in the shortest possible time. As for whether to accept them, the choice is yours. Lin Minji lightly kicked the ball of choice to Jiang Chen. Jiang Chen looked silently at the girl named Lin Yi, number 0001, lying in the hibernation chamber. At this moment, she was looking at him with an expressionless look like a baby. The clothes covering her body slipped off. She reached out and gently touched the cold barrel of the gun, curiously touching its outline, completely unaware that she was naked. "What is this?" Lin Yi asked. After a long silence, Jiang Chen sighed, put away the rifle in his hand, picked up the clothes, and threw them on her. "Put on your clothes first." "Clothes?" Lin Yi tilted her head. The corner of Jiang Chen's mouth twitched. He now understood the deep meaning behind the saying, "The soul is like a blank sheet of paper." Chapter 994 2001 Sisters. Jiang Chen remembered that a long time ago, when he was in junior high school, he had watched an anime. The background was probably a high-tech city similar to Penglai City, but it was not floating on the sea. There lived a group of very unscientific superpower students. There was a very interesting setting. The clones of the heroine, who was a superpower, were used as cheap weapons for inhumane experiments. The mass production price was only 180,000 yen, and the number was as high as more than 20,000. The price was not as good as the super soldiers of high-end silicone dolls. From any angle, it was quite unscientific. Jiang Chen didn't know how much Lin Yi and her sisters cost, but he thought it wouldn't be cheap. Regarding these clones themselves, and all questions related to East Asia heavy industry, the primary artificial intelligence, based on Dr. Lin Minji, had no intention of answering them at all, and just fooled them with a simple sentence of corporate secrets. After hearing the answer of Lin Minji, Jiang Chen was unhappy at the time. Corporate secrets? Go to hell. That East Asia heavy industry didn't know where it went outside the solar system. However, he couldn't think of any way to deal with a program that couldn't think. Threaten? Don't be ridiculous. Threatening a basic artificial intelligence that didn't know what life and death meant would make people laugh. As for hacking, there were many computer experts in the entire NAC, but when it came to hacking skills that were basically useless, Yao was probably the best. However, Jiang Chen knew very well that, even if Yao's hacking skills were strong, there was probably still a big gap compared to those network security experts who made a living by technology before the war. "I say, can't you put on your clothes by yourself?" Through the steel gloves, Jiang Chen carefully pinched the clothes and tried to put them on Lin Yi. However, Lin Yi was not the titanium alloy skeleton cyborg Lin Ling after all. If she hurt her accidentally, her tears would start to roll in her eyes, and there was a tendency for them to burst out. With a helpless sigh, Jiang Chen stepped out from behind the power armor, took off the clothes hanging on the iron rack, and put them on Lin Yi at random. "You can't even put on your own clothes? Forget it, there's no point in arguing with you. Let's finish this and go back. TSK, don't move your hands. It's nothing to put on clothes. If this guy's more obedient, he can put them on quickly." The problem is that when he was putting clothes on her, her little hands were still curiously touching her body, as if she saw something new. Jiang Chen had no experience in taking care of children, not to mention that from a physical and mental point of view, he couldn't treat her as a child. Her skin, like mutton fat jade, was like a finely crafted work of art. After genetic modification, they had the same beauty and body proportions as Lin Ling. Even for Jiang Chen, who had seen many beauties, it was quite difficult to be completely focused. Finally, he put the one-piece uniform and white coat next to her on her, and raised his arm to wipe the sweat off his face. Glancing at the more than 2,000 hibernation chambers in the hall, he felt a headache when he thought that there were more than 2,000 giant babies lying in them. At this time, Lin Minji on the screen looked at him with interest and interrupted to suggest, "You can ask those people outside to come in and help you. At your current speed, I'm afraid you won't be able to help everyone put on clothes until tomorrow." "I don't plan to get everyone out today." Jiang Chen glanced at the man on the screen before confirming to accept these clones. "I need to consult someone's opinion." "Who?" "Lin Ling." Lin Minji's expression showed a hint of surprise, but soon returned to normal. However, his instantaneous change of expression did not escape Jiang Chen's eyes. "You seem to know something about Lin Ling." Raising an eyebrow, Jiang Chen tightened the zipper of Lin Yi's collar and looked at the man on the screen with a scrutinizing look. "Well, I know a little. When writing me, my creator Dr. Lin Minji once mentioned his daughter to me." Lin Minji had no intention of hiding it. After all, such private matters could not be called corporate secrets and naturally did not fall within the scope of his confidentiality. What did he mention? Jiang Chen asked. The mind tree diagram, the collective unconscious and the unified behavior model, and the principle of brainwave resonance, seem to be related to genetics and brain science. Jiang Chen was slightly stunned by the words of the man on the screen. If his understanding ability was not a problem, the three terms in the mouth of this primary artificial intelligence seemed to be biological fields that had nothing to do with electronic technology. In Jiang Chen's impression, Dr. Lin Minji should be an expert in the field of electronic machinery, who has spent his life exploring the way to immortality by engraving thoughts on circuit boards, replacing flesh and bones with electricity and machinery. In order to lead civilization to the highest direction, he even sacrificed his daughter's happiness, and even gave up his body, and sealed his brain in a small culture tank. Such a paranoid madman would actually be interested in the knowledge that he sneered at? Jiang Chen silently memorized these keywords, climbed back into the power armor, restarted the armor's power system, and reached out to pick up Lin Yi, who was looking at him innocently. Seeing that Jiang Chen was about to leave, Lin Minji on the screen reminded him as if he was afraid that he would forget. There are still 1,999 people who haven't been released from hibernation. I suggest you take them with you. I'll be back in the next 2 days. Jiang Chen didn't plan to waste any more time talking to the artificial intelligence. He left these words and walked out without looking back. Fortunately, Lin Yi could speak, so there was no problem with basic communication. On the way to the outside of the shelter, Jiang Chen told her his name, and also told her what to pay attention to when going outside, and not to reach out and touch anything curious. In addition to telling her these basic common sense, Jiang Chen also casually asked about her own situation. Although she knew nothing about common sense, when it came to knowledge related to deep action mechanism of brainwaves and non-specific projection system of cortical thalamus, she could talk a lot of things clearly and quickly, which made Jiang Chen feel that he had been studying at his grandmother's house for several years in college, and was not as good as a clone with a mind of only 3 years old. After crossing the corridor and returning to the elevator, Hu Cheng hurried to meet him. He didn't even look at the girl in Jiang Chen's arms who was looking around. Although he didn't know whether this girl and the one in the fishbone base looked like a mold, his intuition told him that knowing too much would not be good for him, so he wisely chose to pretend not to see it. Marshall, are you okay? Jiang Chen couldn't hate this overly loyal knight, so he just smiled. What can happen to me? It's safe inside. I have a task for you. Just give me your orders. Hu Cheng nodded. Take your people to temporarily block this place. No one is allowed to cross this door without my order. Jiang Chen pointed at his feet and gave the order. Hu Cheng straightened his chest and stood at attention, slamming his fist on his chest in a knight's salute. Understood. Not to mention guarding the door. Even if the marshal asked him to fight the death claws, he wouldn't frown at all. I'm really sorry. The dormitory started to lose power last night. There was no internet when I got up in the morning, and my phone was out of power and couldn't turn on the hotspot. As a result, I just uploaded it now. TT. Chapter 995 2001 Sisters. Imagine if you ran into someone who looked exactly like you on the street one day. Your first reaction would definitely not be to walk up and shake hands with him. Of course, it is impossible to encounter such a weird thing in reality. After all, the law restricts the development of cloning technology, and modern society cannot allow such anti-human experiments to be carried out. When Jiang Chen took Lin Yi back to the fishbone base by helicopter, it was already night. It was inconvenient to arrange accommodation for Lin Yi outside at this time, and Jiang Chen was worried about her staying outside alone, so he took her home. This also brought a problem. Linling might meet this sister who she had never met tonight. Who is she? Standing in the living room of the villa, when she saw Lin Yi for the first time, Linling's two willow-like eyebrows stood up, staring at her vigilantly and said. It seemed that she was frightened by Linling's actions. Lin Yi shrank her neck and hid behind Jiang Chen in fear. Jiang Chen expected Linling to have such a reaction. Sighing, he stretched out his big hand and rubbed Lin Yi's head, patted her back gently, and gently brought her to Linling. Your sister? Somatic cell clones should be considered sisters, right? Jiang Chen didn't know how to define the ethical relationship between the mother and the clone, and even made this statement have a questioning tone. It's not his fault. After all, there is no case to refer to. I'm afraid that someone else would also have a hard time with this problem. I don't remember that I have a sister. Linling looked at Jiang Chen with a serious face, and rarely put on a serious look, and said word by word, "Tell me, this woman, where did you pick her up from?" Jiang Chen felt that this sentence was not right when it came out of Linling's mouth, but he couldn't tell what was wrong for a while. Perhaps they heard the noise downstairs, and Sun Jiao and Xiao Rao also went downstairs to the living room curiously. When she saw the little girl standing behind Jiang Chen, Sun Jiao was obviously stunned, and then looked at Linling with a strange expression. "Your long-lost sister?" Unlike her sister, Xiao Rao looked at this side with interest. Her beautiful eyes fell on Linling for a while, and then on the little girl hiding behind Jiang Chen like a little squirrel. She covered her mouth, and chuckled with a bit of evil. "Ah. It seems that the family needs a pair of chopsticks." Hearing this, Linling yelled, like she was furious. "Impossible. How could I? How could I live with this person who looks exactly like me? It's so weird. There must be something strange here. Wait. There are no electronic eyes. It shouldn't be a cyborg. Woo woo woo. Damn it." Linling jumped to the side of Lin Yi, ignoring the frightened like eyes, stretched out a pair of magic claws, pinched and looked at this fake left and right. As a result, she fell into frustration and entanglement because of inexplicable jealousy and other complicated emotions. A pair of chopsticks? Jiang Chen's expression was a little embarrassed. He hasn't told Linling that at the bottom of Poang Lake, there are 1,999 clones, based on her lying in hibernation chambers. In the living room of the villa, Jiang Chen, as the head of the family, held a family meeting for the first time in a long time regarding Lin Yi's problem. Even Yao, wearing a loose nightgown and bunny slippers, walked downstairs to the living room in a daze. He couldn't remember clearly when the family sat together like this to discuss a problem last time. Facing the curious, inquiring, angry, or sleepy gazes of the girls, Jiang Chen cleared his throat, sorted out his thoughts in his mind, and spoke out everything. From his conversation with the director of shelter number 118 in block 6 to the treasure he opened at the bottom of Poang Lake. Basically, this is the situation. After explaining the whole story for half an hour, Jiang Chen looked around at the girls helplessly. "Regarding this little girl, I hope to hear your opinions." At this point, Jiang Chen paused and looked at Linling, who was sitting next to Lin Yi with her mouth pouted. Of course, the most important thing is Linling's opinion. Unexpectedly, Jiang Chen would suddenly turn the topic to herself. Linling's face suddenly turned red, and she became a little embarrassed. Me. After all, she is your clone. There are 1999 clones of you from your somatic cells sleeping at the bottom of Poang Lake. Jiang Chen looked at Lin Yi, who was sitting in the corner of the living room not far away, and said with a complicated expression, "You have the right to decide whether to accept her and them." Hearing Jiang Chen's words, Linling was slightly stunned, and then lowered her head in distress. How to deal with it? She was not sure in her heart. Although Linling was usually more venomous, she was not bad by nature, and could even be said to be a kind girl. Although she could not accept these fakes cloned from her own DNA both physically and psychologically, she also could not make a cruel conclusion about their fate. After a struggle of thought, Linling gritted her teeth, and finally made up her mind. Accepting them is not impossible. Hearing Linling's words, Jiang Chen breathed a sigh of relief, looked at her gratefully and smiled. "Thank you." Linling blushed, turned her head away, and looked to the side, muttering softly, It's not for you. Don't be so self-indulgent." 2000 scientists are indeed very important to Jiang Chen, but he can't completely ignore the feelings of the people around him. It would be best if Linling could accept it. If not, he would not force her. These clones could be placed at the bottom of Poang Lake, or in camp number 27 to be isolated from other people, and their scientific research value could still be brought into play. However, the efficiency may be slightly lower, and it will always be not in Linling's heart. Since Linling expressed her willingness to accept the 2000 clone sisters, Sun Jiao, Xiao Rao, and Yao would naturally have no objection. However, after solving the big problem of staying or leaving, there is still a big problem in front of everyone. The key question is where to live? Sun Jiao put her index finger lightly on her lower lip and said thoughtfully, if it's just 1 or 2 more pairs of chopsticks, it doesn't matter, but more than 2,000 pairs of chopsticks. At this point, Sun Jiao looked at Jiang Chen with some embarrassment and raised a very realistic question. Even if our house is twice as big, I'm afraid it can't accommodate so many people. Where to live? This is indeed a problem. It is definitely impossible to put 2,000 linling in the house, but if they are left outside, it is hard to be reassured. After all, their mental state is no different from that of 2 or 3-year-old children, and it is obviously not suitable for them to contact the survivors now. But at this time, Sun Jiao did come up with a good idea. How about we build a research institute next to the villa? Aren't these 2,000 Lin clone scientists in various fields? It's safer to let them live in the research institute than to let them run around outside. Sun Jiao suggested. Chapter 996. Good things picked up from the seabed. There are clones in the wasteland, but they are not welcome anywhere. Especially those clones produced from the shelter. They are just like toys in the wasteland. This phenomenon has improved after the NAC came to power, but people's natural discrimination against this unnatural life cannot be changed by a simple decree. The best thing is to separate Linling's sisters from the survivors and have professional caregivers take care of them. Sun Jiao's proposal was approved by Linling. Building a research institute next to the backyard of the villa is a compromise. It doesn't need to be too far away, and you don't need to see it every day. If you put yourself in their shoes, if you wake up early in the morning and see someone who looks exactly like you wandering around, Jiang Chen asks himself that he can't stand it. In the end, Jiang Chen adopted Sun Jiao's proposal. The next day, he went to the logistics department to find Lu Huasheng, demolished the old warehouse facing the back of the villa, and built a semi-enclosed research institute on the foundation of the warehouse that can accommodate 2,000 people, including food and accommodation and other living areas. Then, Jiang Chen found Wang Qing again, and told her to recruit a group of trustworthy female employees from the Fishbone Base or the 6th block, preferably those born in the dome and shelter, and with work experience in nursing and kindergarten, to go to Hangzhou and wait for orders to recover Linling with the number 0002222000 from the T7 shelter. Wang Qing was careful in her work, and Jiang Chen was quite relieved to let her do it. He couldn't keep an eye on this matter all the time. After all, he had to return to the real world in a few days and fly to Moscow. After repeatedly reminding her of the matters that needed attention, Jiang Chen left the community center and went to Jianglin's Aerospace Science and Technology Research Institute. When Jiang Chen arrived at the Aerospace Science and Technology Research Institute, Jianglin was not in the office. After asking his secretary, he learned that the chief engineer who couldn't hold back his hands had personally gone to the grassroots to do construction. I'll go to the warehouse later. Find a place for me to put these boxes of tea for him. When he asks, just say I sent them to him. Jiang Chen handed the bag in his hand to the secretary. Dangting Beluachan, the quality is naturally the best of the best. These things are just ordinary things for Jiang Chen, but for the survivors in the wasteland, they are good things that are in high demand. After all, not everything can be solved by technology, especially this kind of luxury goods cultivated by traditional technology. Even if it is placed in front of the station, this kind of pure natural and pollution-free good thing is not something that can be easily bought in the mall. The secretary hurriedly took the bag from Jiang Chen's hand and bowed on behalf of his leader with fear and trepidation to express his gratitude. It was not because the things in his hand were valuable, but because it was a reward from the marshal himself. I'm sorry to bother you to deliver it in person. Jiang Chen smiled and waved his hand, saying casually, no problem, it's on the way anyway. He has nothing to lack in his life now. If he sees any good things in the present world and buys them back, but can't use them, he habitually throws them into the storage space and brings them to the end of the world to give them to people. These are just small favors in his eyes, but in the eyes of his subordinates, they are a great gift that can be regarded as a family heirloom, which is perfect for winning people's hearts. After leaving the office, Jiang Chen walked towards the warehouse opposite the backyard of the Aerospace Science and Technology Research Institute. Unlike the starring trade in the present world, the Aerospace Science and Technology Research Institute is the scientific research institution with the lowest security level in the Fishbone base. There is even no access control at the gate of the institute. Anyone can enter and exit at will, although generally no one walks here. It is easy to understand why such a situation would occur. In this wasteland, aerospace technology is probably the least valuable technology. All aerospace technologies since the 22nd century have been developed based on space elevators. And now, building a space elevator in this wasteland is not possible, and there is no need to do so at all, including the internal knack. Most people regard this Aerospace Science and Technology Research Institute as the personal hobby of the marshal, just like the department that specializes in developing games. No one is really optimistic about the development of aerospace technology. If it were not for the chief designer Jiang Lin, who occasionally participated in the update of mechanical exoskeleton technology, this institute might have lost its last sense of existence and the entire Fishbone base. Jiang Chen also knew this, but he did not care much. After all, it is better for this department to have a low sense of existence. Anyway, the things it tinkers with are mainly exported to the present world, and they are not used in the end of the world. When Jiang Chen arrived at the warehouse, Jiang Lin was busy with his researchers in front of a strangely shaped wreckage. He also saw an acquaintance here. Wu Yu from the White Whale Undersea Research Station was standing next to Jiang Lin, looking at several researchers holding instruments and fiddling with the wreckage with interest. Because he was the only one with nothing to do, he noticed Jiang Chen at the door of the warehouse at the first time. "Hey, what brings you here?" Wu Yu's eyes lit up, and he immediately came up with a smile. Jiang Chen greeted Jiang Lin, indicating that they didn't need to pay attention to him, and then looked at Wu Yu and greeted him with a smile. "I wanted to ask you the same question. Why don't you stay in the 6th block to sign a business? Haha, isn't it just the beginning of spring? The caravans are all rushing inland, which is the off-season for us escorts. When they have made enough money inland, and it is almost winter, they will think about going to Japan, Beiyu, or even further away," Wu Yu said with a smile, patting the wreckage of a certain aircraft next to him. "Anyway, we are idle anyway. Look, we just happened to find this thing while cruising in the Western Pacific. I guess you might be interested, so I'm here to cater to your interests." At this time, Jiang Lin threw away the tools in his hand, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and walked towards Jiang Chen. Shuttle 07 engine, a product of Pan Asia Aerospace Group. Judging from the fragments on the interface, it should be from the Sea Dragon. If I remember correctly, the Sea Dragon is a transport ship that goes to and from Mars. You can pick up this thing. Your luck is too good. Have you seen it? Wu Yu raised his eyebrows and asked Jiang Lin with interest. Because of work needs, the two of them often come into contact and know each other's background. For example, Jiang Lin is a native of the wasteland, born in the post-war period, which Wu Yu is very clear about. "I've seen it on video." Jiang Lin shrugged. "Is this engine used to go back and forth to Mars?" While the two were chatting, Jiang Chen had already walked to the engine with interest and reached out to knock on the titanium alloy shell. It was really a pillow for a sleepy man. Xinghua Trade was worrying about how to design a spacecraft to go back and forth to Mars, and Wu Yu sent him a big gift. "It's the engine wreckage," Jiang Lin emphasized. "It's no problem to restore the technology in this wreckage, but building a spacecraft outside the Earth-Moon system is not enough with just an engine. It's more troublesome than building a spacecraft within the Earth-Moon system. It's good to be able to restore the technology, which is better than using the engine of a small plane for long-distance transportation. With this engine, it should be no problem to design a colony ship that can go to Mars before the end of 19. Name a price." Jiang Chen looked at Wu Yu. "It's the same old rule. We'll charge a salvage fee of 20,000 credit points," Wu Yu said with a smile. "Deal." Jiang Chen took out a graphene card from his pocket and swiped it on Wu Yu's app. 20,000 credit points were directly transferred to the bank account registered by the White Whale Exploration Station at NAC. Looking at the jumping numbers in the app, Wu Yu was so happy that he couldn't stop smiling. 20,000 credit points is already a considerable amount of foreign exchange income for the White Whale Exploration Station. The goods in the 6th block are all hot selling goods in the White Whale Exploration Station, especially those canned beef and pork, which cannot be grown in the seabed farm. As for those steel, aluminum, and even rare earth materials, it goes without saying that he has to purchase a large number of them every quarter and ship them back. For him, these 10,000 credit points are simply too easy to come by. And this is exactly what Jiang Chen wants. He is not afraid that these people from the White Whale Exploration Station will make money from him. Only if they make money from him will they try every means to salvage those good things from the Pacific Ocean and ship them to him. These things are just a pile of scrap metal in the hands of others, but in his hands, they are good things that cannot be exchanged for any amount of canned food or instant noodles. Chapter 997, Divine Communication. After getting the money, Wu Yu didn't stay here for long. He smiled and exchanged a few words with Jiang Chen, then bowed and said goodbye. After Wu Yu left, Jiang Chen asked Jiang Lin to pack up the engine first, and according to the old rules, he would tinker with the design drawings through reverse engineering, and then send the prototype and the drawings to the warehouse in the backyard of his villa. After explaining these things, he pulled Jiang Lin aside, and took out a grid-shaped drawing from his pocket. This time he came to the Institute of Aerospace Science and Technology not mainly to see the spacecraft, but to ask Jiang Lin to help design a piece of equipment, or a weapon. Taking the drawing from Jiang Chen's hand, Jiang Lin frowned, tilted his neck, and touched his chin, to look at it for a long time, but he didn't come to a conclusion. Seeing that he didn't respond for a long time, Jiang Chen couldn't help but urge him. How is it? Are you sure? I'm sure Wanghei City is full of this thing, and the closer you go to the city center, the more you will see. Jiang Lin returned the sketch to Jiang Chen, and couldn't help asking, but what is this thing for? Jiang Chen slapped his head, he almost forgot about it. Aren't those steel prisms inserted into the concrete ground the slow drop devices for NATO's orbital airborne troops? Why would he need the 3-view drawing he asked the modeler of future technology to download from the game? Yes, the prism-shaped iron box drawn on the sketch in his hand is the slow drop device he intends to equip his aerospace defense force. According to his idea, using this iron box that can be thrown directly from the synchronous orbit to the surface, his orbital airborne troops will be able to depart directly from Xinghuan City and be deployed at any location on the Earth in just 1 hour. Don't worry about what it's for. It will be useful in my hands. Jiang Chen laughed and fooled the matter away as usual. Seeing that the marshal said so, Jiang Lin naturally would not break the casserole to ask for the details, just for a little curiosity. He simply nodded and took on the task, saying that he could hand in the prototype and drawings in half a month at the latest. As for the sketch, Jiang Chen had already crumpled it into a ball and thrown it into the trash can. Since there was something ready-made to learn from, there was no need to design according to his sketch. He could just pick up 2 airdrop capsules that had not been recycled from the ruins in the city center and reverse engineer them. After leaving the Institute of Aerospace Science and Technology, Jiang Chen walked around the fishbone base, calling it an inspection, but in fact he was just looking around. It had been almost 4 years, and the base had a new look almost every year. He couldn't even recognize some places. For example, the wall that was once drenched in alien blood had now been demolished and moved to streets away. If it went north for more than 10 kilometers, it would be almost next to the 6th block. And the sewer connecting the 6th block and the fishbone base had been widened, and even paved with a magnetic track, and a simple urban rapid transit had been built. According to Chunan's plan, if the Holy Shield system was successfully repaired, maybe after another 5 or 6 years of development, the 6th block would be merged with the fishbone base. According to him, the quality of the houses in the suburbs of Wanghei City is okay, and it is a pity to leave them abandoned. Since the aliens and zombies have been eliminated, it is always more cost-effective to reuse them than to demolish and rebuild. As he walked, Jiang Chen let his thoughts drift away, thinking about what else this base lacks. What else is missing? It seems that nothing is missing. The newly built Eden No. 2 and No. 3 have also begun to be put into production. Not only vegetables and fruits, but now they have also started to raise cloned pigs, cows, and sheep. Combined with the sugar cane and canned crab roe imported from Yazhou, food is no longer a rarity in Wanhai City. Even the grassroots people living in the outer circle can taste meat twice a week. It is precisely because of this that his personal prestige is almost as high as a myth. In this wasteland, whoever can make people well fed, clothed, and have a safe home is the well-deserved savior, and can be supported by everyone. It is no exaggeration to say that even without the citizen rank, knight's medal and collar of honor, it is impossible for anyone to stand up against him. Jiang Chen walked all the way to the doorstep of his home, and he didn't think of what else was missing in the base. While he was pleased with the ability of his subordinates, he couldn't help feeling a little lonely. Although he was happy to be a hands-off boss and leave all the troubles to his subordinates, when all his subordinates grew up, he found that he could not help at all. Smiling and shaking his head, Jiang Chen threw these hypocritical thoughts behind his mind and opened the door of the villa. In any case, this is a good thing. Worrying about good things is just boredom. The next day, the engineering team was deployed behind the courtyard wall of the villa and began to build the research institute according to Jiang Chen's requirements. The foundation and everything are ready, and the building does not need to be built very high. With the construction speed of the Fishbone Base engineering team, it can be completed in 2 weeks at the latest. These days, Jiang Chen just walks around during the day to make his presence felt in the base. At night, I returned to the villa, fed the 2 annoying kittens, and indulged in the gentleness of the sisters. Time passed quickly, and half a week passed in the blink of an eye. Just as the artificial intelligence said, Lin Yi's learning ability is really strong. In just a few days, she has learned to dress herself, eat by herself, go to the toilet, and take a bath by herself, and know to dry her hair before going to bed, and other common sense in life. There is one thing that the artificial intelligence did not say correctly, that is, she actually knows all these things. Since she could name things like clothes, chopsticks, and towels, she certainly couldn't have been unaware of what they were used for. However, these things were stored in her brain as knowledge, rather than as a habit written in her body. After all, it took at most 2 or 3 weeks for an embryo to develop into its current appearance. Not to mention a proper childhood. Jiang Chen even suspected that they had not lived a normal life for a few days. As soon as they came out of the culture tank, they were put into a hibernation chamber and lied down, receiving knowledge in a deep sleep. On the other hand, Linling's attitude has also changed a lot. From the initial rejection to alienation, now she has almost gotten used to this cheap sister. Although the two look like they were carved from the same mold, it is still easy to tell them apart. For example, Linling, a cyborg, has 2 different colored eyes, one red and one black, and her skin is ridiculously white, and she has a head of silver hair like an elf. And this Lin Yi has standard black hair. Although her skin is white, it is also white to the level of yellow people, not as exaggerated as Linling. In order to make the difference more obvious, Linling also ordered Lin Yi in a domineering way, not allowing her to have the same hair as her, not allowing her to wear the same clothes, although she didn't have the same clothes to wear. The strange thing is that, except for Jiang Chen, whom she met for the first time, Lin Yi actually listened to Linling the most in this villa. Although she didn't obey her every word, it was almost the same. She followed Linling like a little follower all day long. So much so that one day, she discovered a special ability, communicating with Lin Yi in consciousness. This feeling is very mysterious, and even Linling herself can't figure it out. It's like the 2 people didn't say a word, didn't even look at each other, and even stood in 2 different rooms, but after entering a certain state, they can understand each other's thoughts. This state is quite unstable, and Linling herself didn't figure out what was going on, and she made a lot of jokes because of it. Whether it's Jiang Chen or Linling herself, they can't say whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, nor can they say what the remaining 1999 clones will look like after waking up. But in any case, this is an incredible discovery. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 998. Warmth before departure. After a few days of thinking, Linling still didn't understand the connection between her and Lin Yi. In her words, it was as if there was an invisible data line between their brains. When a voice called her, if she answered, she could sense the connection between her and Lin Yi. This connection was very mysterious. It was not just the thoughts in her mind that were shared. It seemed that even thoughts, knowledge, and experience, which were difficult to be directly described in words, could be exchanged through this connection. Simply put, it was like two servers connected in parallel. Because the computing power of the electronic man was comparable to that of a quantum computer, Linling served as the host. Although the knowledge related to the deep mechanism of brainwaves and the non-specific projection system of the cortex and thalamus that Lin Yi mastered was beyond Linling's research field, this knowledge was like being installed in a mobile hard disk and could be borrowed by Linling when establishing a connection. This feeling was difficult to describe. Jiang Chen thought about it himself. It was probably equivalent to putting Linling and 2000 sisters together. They were equivalent to a large-scale integrated chip supercomputer, and it was mainly based on biological cores. Linling did not deny this statement, but she did not give a definite answer. She was not sure whether 1-on-1 and 1-on-2000 were the same. After all, before the war, cloning was a scientific forbidden area. Even if someone was secretly experimenting, this kind of national secret could not be accessed by just anyone. There was no precedent for her and Jiang Chen to refer to. Now the research institute has not been built yet, and there is no place to put Linling's sisters. Now they are still lying in the hibernation chamber under the care of professional caregivers. But before they moved in, Jiang Chen, who had nothing to do, took her to do a lot of experiments. For example, about this sensing distance. Jiang Chen once tried to let Linling and Lin Yi stand at the two ends of the fishbone base respectively and sense this connection at a distance of more than 10 kilometers. What surprised Linling and Jiang Chen was that, although this connection was weakened as the distance increased, it could still be felt. While being surprised at the magic of this telepathy, Jiang Chen also secretly wondered if this was another trick of East Asia heavy industry. After all, he seemed to have heard some new words like mind tree diagram from the AI designed by Lin Minji. If they were said to be just a simple enterprise, Jiang Chen would never believe it. Applying the logic of the present world, Dr. Lin Minji was just a poor scholar with a lot of debts. Even if he attracted the attention of a large enterprise because of a paper that was criticized and struggled by the Science Ethics Committee, it would not make sense for him to get such a large budget, right? Even for a large enterprise, money does not come from the wind. Jiang Chen asked himself that the treatment of his subordinates doing scientific research was quite good, but he would not let them do whatever they wanted. The budget of each project had to go through the approval process, and it was accurate to where every bill was used, not to mention that someone used the budget to build a shelter and do private work for the Supreme Plan, and finally even used his daughter's somatic cells to clone more than 2000 copies to send to the future. As long as the management of East Asia heavy industry was not kicked in the head by a donkey, there was only one possibility, that Dr. Lin Minji was just their pawn. And this East Asia heavy industry, I'm afraid it's not that simple. Being able to dig a big hole in the urban area of Wanghai City, the economic center of Pan-Asian cooperation, and being able to leave one's own stamp on so many civil defense projects in that special era, I'm afraid the political background behind it is not ambiguous. However, Jiang Chen still couldn't figure it out. These officials and entrepreneurs were flying into space on the Zhenghe colonial ship. Maybe when they wake up from the hibernation chamber in 400 or 500 years, they will have arrived in a picturesque new world. What else is there for them to miss about this barren planet? Jiang Chen shook his head and put the matter behind him. It's boring to worry about the organization's mess before the war. I can't figure out anything here. If I'm really curious, I might as well ask Han Junhe. Speaking of which, since that time on the airship, he hasn't helped her treat her facial paralysis for a long time. The spiritual political commissar is strong, but he can't stand the improved slave chip that the slave owners in the wasteland have made themselves. Jiang Chen pressed the right button, and she had to GC as she wanted. Ahem, of course, he had only done such a beastly thing twice. I'm going back tomorrow. After kissing Sun Jiao gently on the lips, Jiang Chen, exhausted, lay down beside her, not even able to wipe the sweat off his face, and said with a slight gasp. Beside her, her sister Xiaorao had shrunk into a shrimp ball, with slightly messy hair sticking to her half-closed peach blossoms, and she fell asleep in a daze. This little girl teased Jiang Chen in any way during the day, but now she was severely bullied by Jiang Chen and Sun Jiao. Previously, she shouted brother-in-law, sister, no, as if begging for mercy, but now even her voice was a little hoarse. Thanks to this, Jiang Chen's bones were almost broken by fatigue. The only people who could make him so tired were Sun Jiao, who had 3 attributes that were off the charts, and her sister who was no less capable. Can't we go back later? Sun Jiao pouted slightly, turned over and lay beside Jiang Chen's ear, like a spoiled female cat, biting Jiang Chen's ear from time to time and said, I also want to stay here all day. Jiang Chen rolled his eyes. It's so comfortable here. He was not false in what he said. Originally, he just wanted to be a rich man in the real world, but who would have thought that he couldn't stop himself? Ambition will expand, and when it sprouts to an uncontrollable degree, you will have no chance to stop. Not to mention that he knew that the colony ship was on its way to his hometown, and it was even more impossible for him to stop while he was ahead. Just coax me. Sun Jiao's pouting mouth did not fall at all, and she obviously did not believe Jiang Chen's rhetoric. Who would not enjoy a comfortable life and rush to live a hard life? She told Jiang Chen more than once that, when Lin Ling figured out a way to go to the real world, the first thing she would do was to take off the hat of the marshal's wife, and whoever wanted to be the marshal could be the marshal, and leave this wasteland behind, and follow him to the 21st century to enjoy life. She had no interest in caring about the food, drink, and defecation of these survivors. Who would want to be a king in a garbage dump when they can go to the rich area to be a rich man? If it wasn't for helping Jiang Chen, and she had nothing to do anyway, she wouldn't have caused herself so much trouble. Thinking about Jiang Chen abandoning her to go back to the real world to enjoy life, and using videos and photos to tempt her every now and then, Sun Jiao was so angry that her teeth itched. She couldn't help but bite Jiang Chen's shoulder, then turned over and sat on him. Ouch. You are born in the year of the dog. Wait, what are you doing? Sister is not full. Sun Jiao squinted her eyes and smirked. She stretched out her hand to hook Jiang Chen's chin, and the sadistic aura she had used on her sister before was released again. Lie down and don't move. Be honest. Wait, my recovery ability is not as strong as yours. Let's continue tomorrow morning, okay? It's already time. I really want to sleep. Jiang Chen said with a smile as he looked at the face approaching with a smirk. With the buff of toughness, if it comes to recovery ability, Jiang Chen knows very well that 10 of himself can't compare to her. What's more, when he was tormenting Xiaorao, his bullets were already empty, and his calves were almost shaking. This is not up to you. A pair of peach blossom eyes moved slightly. Xiaorao had woken up at some point, and was looking at this side with great interest. There was no sign of tiredness on her face. Xiaorao, help me control him. Okay, sister. Sun Xiaorao smiled and walked around Jiang Chen's back, hooked her arms around his arms, blinked her eyes, and looked at Jiang Chen's eyes through the mirror on the bedside. Brother-in-law, don't move. The back of his head rested on 2 pieces of hot tenderness. Jiang Chen didn't have the strength to resist. He could only watch Sun Jiao, who was grinning, move her knees and approach him with her teeth and claws. Chapter 999 Return to the Real World. Sometimes Jiang Chen felt that Sun Jiao's smirk was really like him. No, to be precise, the S side of himself that would occasionally show up might have been learned from her. Looking at that cat-like peaceful sleeping face, Jiang Chen leaned down slightly and left a kiss on her forehead. After a night of recuperation, his physical strength had almost recovered. Moving his body, Jiang Chen got out of bed lightly without disturbing the 2 girls. However, as soon as his center of gravity left the bed, his legs couldn't help but sway, and he almost fell forward without losing face. He turned back and glared at Sun Jiao fiercely. Looking at that happy and peaceful sleeping face, he immediately lost his temper again. He held onto the wardrobe with a grin and walked out of the bedroom with weak steps. The side effects of the refrigerant and mild anemia made it difficult for Yao to get up in the morning. On weekdays, Xiao Rao was usually responsible for breakfast. Now that Xiao Rao was lying down and Sun Jiao was sleeping in, Linling could not be relied on, so the responsibility of making breakfast naturally fell on him as the head of the family. Although she was not interested in cooking, Linling would never be vague about eating. After washing up early, she sat down at the dining table, waiting eagerly. Jiang Chen originally planned to send her directly to the community center cafeteria for breakfast, but now there was Lin Yi next to her who was not convenient to walk around, so he had to go to the kitchen for the first time in a long time, yawned and made breakfast, and came out with the fried eggs. As for milk and bread, he didn't need to worry about them. Linling still knew how to use the microwave, and they had already been served on the table. Your walking posture, is there something wrong with you? Seeing Jiang Chen's weighing and placing the plate of fried eggs on the table, Linling looked at him a little strangely. I fell when I was going downstairs. You're lying. When I went to the bathroom last night, I clearly saw Sister Xiao Rao go to your room. You must have done something bad to become like this morning. Linling bit a piece of bread with fried eggs, chewing with her restless mouth and speaking vaguely. What do you care? Jiang Chen glared at Linling unhappily. HMPH. After swallowing the food in her mouth, Linling stuck out her tongue, pouted and looked away. Lin Yi tilted her head, and the bread slices held in her hands stopped in front of her mouth. At this moment, she was looking at the two of them curiously with her ignorant eyes. Also, isn't there a toilet on the first floor? Why do you have to go to the bathroom on the second floor to use the toilet? Suddenly realizing another problem, Jiang Chen said unhappily again. What do you care? Linling blushed, hesitating and not answering, and finally just pretended not to hear and stopped talking. She didn't know why. The bathroom on the first floor was closer, but she couldn't help but go upstairs every night to go to the bathroom. Seeing that Linling was unusually quiet, Jiang Chen stopped arguing with him and concentrated on tasting his cooking. After finishing breakfast, Jiang Chen went to the kitchen again and stuffed about 20 mango puddings from the storage space into the refrigerator. After returning to the dining room, he casually said to Linling who was busy finishing breakfast, I put all the puddings in the refrigerator. Don't eat them all at once. Yeah. Linling buried her head and responded in a low voice. Jiang Chen glanced at Linling strangely, not understanding what was wrong with her today. If it was normal, she would definitely jump for joy when she heard that the refrigerator was full of puddings. Now she was so quiet that it was not like her at all. Although it was strange, Jiang Chen didn't take it to heart. After all, no matter how lively a person is, there will be a day or two when they are not active. This is a very normal thing. After breakfast, he went to the bathroom, brushed his teeth, and washed his face, and then took a shower. His body had almost recovered, at least his calves were no longer shaking, and his waist was not so sore. After washing up, Jiang Chen thought it was time to go back, so he went to Yao's room. It was just after 8 o'clock, so Yao was not awake yet. The little girl didn't have the habit of locking the door, so Jiang Chen just pushed it lightly and opened the door and walked into Yao's boudoir. A faint fragrance came to his face, and following this unique fragrance of Yao, Jiang Chen walked to the bed lightly. Without breaking the silence, he took advantage of the hazy morning light and looked closely at this cute sleeping face, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. It seemed that he had dreamed of something delicious in his dream, and the slightly opened and closed lips were curved in a happy arc. A sparkling silver thread adorned the corner of her mouth, just like the dewdrops hanging on the mimosa in the morning, so cute that it melted. Jiang Chen did not wake Yao up, but leaned over and kissed her soft face as a simple farewell. He got up and left the boudoir and gently closed the door for her. He opened his eyes from the soft bed and heard the sea breeze blowing in through the open window and the rustling sound of the sea tide brought by the sea breeze. After slowly brewing this feeling of belonging to the 21st century in his mind for a while, Jiang Chen got up and got out of bed. The room was quiet. Aisha had already gone to Moscow, and Xiao had already gone to the future building at this time. He was the only living person in the whole villa. After returning to the present world, Jiang Chen's hands were not idle. He immediately began to pack his luggage for Usher. Although Natasha said that he could stay at her house, Considering that he might stay in Moscow, where he was unfamiliar with the place for 2 or 3 weeks, he still had to prepare some necessary things. Whether it was in the suitcase or in the storage space, it was already noon when Jiang Chen packed all his luggage. Jiang Chen walked into the kitchen humming a little tune. He was about to cook some side dishes and get 2 bottles of good wine to reward himself, but when he opened the refrigerator and took a look, he was speechless. There was only half a pizza and a box of unopened pasta in it. There was champagne, but there was not even a snack to go with the wine. It was obvious that no one in the family had cooked in the past few days. It was easy to understand why such a situation would occur. Aisha, the chef at home, had gone to Moscow, and Jiang Chen had also stayed in the end of the world for a while. For more than a week, Sun Jiao was the only one left at home. Since both meals could be solved in the cafeteria of the future building, I think she knew how to cook and was too lazy to cook alone. This girl, why is she so lazy? Jiang Chen couldn't help but mutter after closing the refrigerator door. Although someone would deliver the ingredients after a phone call, it would take 2 hours, even if it was faster. By then, it would be time for a nap, so why would she eat? Thinking of this, Jiang Chen left the kitchen depressed and went back to the garage. Since there was no food at home, he had to go to the future building. Chapter 1000 A wonderful and short lunch break. When Jiang Chen walked into the future building, it was lunchtime. People were coming and going in the building. People from various departments were talking and laughing as they gathered around the elevator. Fortunately, Jiang Chen came early. If he had played for a while longer, he would have caught up with the rush hour after get off work. Even if there were twice as many elevators, it would not have been helpful. But none of this had anything to do with Jiang Chen. Most employees recognized his face. As long as he squeezed to the side of the elevator, no one would be so tactless as to compete with him for that time. When they arrived at the Western restaurant on the top floor, Jiang Chen looked in the direction of the window and saw Sun Jiao sitting there. Whether he came to the company or not, that seat almost became his exclusive seat. And the seat opposite him, of course, belonged to CEO Zia. After ordering a beef and cheese risotto and a serving of cream ice cream, Jiang Chen walked over to Sun Jiao with his plate and sat down. Seeing that there was another person in front of her, Sun Jiao raised her head slightly. When she saw that the person in front of her was Jiang Chen, her eyes suddenly lit up in surprise, but when she thought about the fact that she was still in the company, she quickly returned to her steady and reserved appearance at work. "How was it? Did you miss me during my absence?" Jiang Chen frowned and looked her up and down with a pair of smiling eyes. Her black hair was tied up behind her head, black framed glasses were perched on her straight and beautiful nose, and her skin was as soft as frost and snow. Her clean and elegant black professional suit did not at all tarnish her natural beauty, but instead enhanced her innate cold and beautiful temperament. It must be said that watching a beautiful woman eat is a spiritual and physical double enjoyment. I saw her 2 green jade fingers holding a silver fork, and she elegantly put the vegetables with salad dressing into her bright red mouth. Her lips were moistened with a bright color by the tomato juice, and the corners of her mouth were stained with the tempting white salad dressing. Any healthy man sitting opposite her would be unable to control himself. After biting a small tomato, Sun Jiao continued to maintain her aloof look and snorted with a nasal tone. "HMPH, what's the point of thinking about it? You're not back." "I'm back now." Jiang Chen smiled cheekily, touched his chin, and looked at her face for a long time. Just when Sun Jiao was about to blush, he stopped harassing her with his eyes and said seriously, "It's only been a week since I last saw you, and you've become more beautiful again." With a slight blush on her cheeks, Sun Jiao rolled her eyes at Jiang Chen and continued to fiddle with the small tomatoes on the salad plate with a fork. Although she didn't say anything, the spring water flowing in her beautiful eyes and the unintentional charm and seductiveness, but all the longing was rendered vividly. Jiang Chen could no longer hold back and hurriedly finished his lunch. When Sun Jiao was about to go back to the office, he stopped her at the door of his office. Perhaps it was because of the extreme longing that everything came naturally. Jiang Chen closed the office door with his backhand and forcefully pushed her against the wall behind the door. He kissed her seductive little mouth without saying anything. The beauty in his arms just moaned and struggled for a few times, and Jiang Chen felt the two little hands pushing on his chest, and then slowly moved along his armpits, and to his back. At this time, the two little hands were no longer pushing him, but turned into a passionate hug. When kissing, Jiang Chen was not honest at all. Not only did he hide and seek that fragrant tongue, but the hand around Xia Xiao's back was not honest at all, and he even fumbled to unbutton the button inside her clothes. The asterisk slid down half an inch, and Xia Xiao's body trembled, as if she had received an electric shock. She wanted to hide behind, but there was a door behind her, and there was no space to hide. What's more, even if there was space to hide, how could Jiang Chen, who had tasted the sweetness, let go of this little lamb on his mouth? If it were normal times, Xia Xiao would definitely spit out hooligan in shame and anger. But now her mouth was blocked, and she could only make a vague humming sound, so it was impossible to hear what she said. Seeing that resistance was ineffective, Xia Xiao, who had always insisted on her principles, softened her attitude a little, and half submissively accepted Jiang Chen's touch on her in the sacred area of the office, and even took her to the office chair next to the French window. Leaning against this French window, it was pitch black from the outside, and it was transparent from the inside, and you could even see the vehicles passing by on the road and the asterisk floating in the air not far away. Standing here and doing bad things, how exciting it is. After tossing for nearly an hour, seeing that most of the lunch break had passed, Jiang Chen finally let Xia Xiao go after her desperate begging for mercy. Although she had been injected with genetic drugs some time ago, she had always lived in a pampered and peaceful environment, and her physical strength was no match for Jiang Chen, who had been through many battles. If she wasn't worried about interfering with her afternoon work, she would have a hard time standing up with her legs together. Do you believe I miss you now? Jiang Chen gently hooked his finger on Xia Xiao's chin, and looked at her with a smile. At this moment, she was facing him, sitting on his legs, and her calves were slightly hooked back, because her center of gravity was tilted backward. She was leaning against the desk with her elbows on a few documents. Her chest was heaving violently, trying to calm her disordered breathing. Xia Xiao's face was thinner after all. Her face was so red that it was almost bleeding, and it was red all the way to the collarbone under her neck. After being flirted with by Jiang Chen, she gritted her teeth and freed her hand to punch his chest. But because her center of gravity was behind her, she quickly retracted her free arm. Dead man. What if someone heard it? Who dares? Jiang Chen raised his eyebrows and teased in a half-joking tone, I will fire anyone who has such long ears. No one could have seen that Jiang Chen had started to think crookedly when the construction of this building started. For example, the sound insulation of his chairman's office was designed according to the world's first-class level. Not to mention passing by the door. Even if you put your ear to the door, you can't hear anything. But then again, who is so bold to put their ear to the door of the chairman's office? It's a good thing that your office is on the top floor, otherwise you would have to run the entire company. Xia Xiao couldn't help but squeeze. Jiang Chen smiled cheekily and did not answer her question directly, but changed the subject. You must be tired, let's change positions. Without waiting for Xia Xiao's consent, Jiang Chen hooked his hands around her waist and hugged her to his arms. It was at this time that Jiang Chen noticed that one of the jade feet wrapped in black silk was wearing a high heel, and the other had thrown the high heel away to an unknown place. How about I help you pick up the shoes? Without saying anything, Xia Xiao hugged Jiang Chen with her backhand and didn't move, pressing her red and hot face against his shoulder, hiding her embarrassment. She didn't know why, but as she hugged him, her shame and anger calmed down. Her restless breathing also calmed down a lot. Perhaps it was because she had worn the mask of a strong woman for too long, and the feeling of being in the arms of her lover like a little bird made her particularly fascinated. Seeing this, Jiang Chen, who was originally going to tease her, swallowed the words on his lips and just hugged her quietly. She didn't have to think about anything, just being held quietly like this, because it was so comfortable. Her breathing became even after a while, and she soon fell asleep. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.